Archive memory. If an item does not appear in our records, it does not exist.
In 1983, fans sat in theaters across the globe and watched the credits roll for The Return of the Jedi as the story of Star Wars came to a close. For nearly a decade, nerds tirelessly racked their brains wondering, is this the end? But on May 1st, 1991, Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn hit bookshelves and The Force Awakened. Sorry, not like that.
I got Heir to the Empire the day that it came out, and of course it's got the little band across, special introductory price.
And all of a sudden there's a trilogy of books called Heir to the Empire. Blew our minds. Like, how could there be more?
Star Wars fans dove back in head first to the galaxy far, far away, reuniting with our galactic heroes and some brand new faces, all of whom would make their mark as legends in the Star Wars mythos, like Captain Paleon, Talon Karrde, Mara Jade, and Grand Admiral Thrawn. Heir to the Empire reached #1 on the New York Times bestseller list and launched a trilogy that sold a combined total of 15 million copies. The trilogy is largely credited with revitalizing the franchise, being called influential, groundbreaking, and making history as the biggest event in the history of Star Wars books. 33 years later, the legacy of Heir is still felt throughout the Star Wars galaxy, with Grand Admiral Thrawn being the big blue bad guy of Star Wars Rebels, the launch of numerous Thrawn books helmed by his maker, Timothy Zahn, within the new canon, and his live-action debut in Disney Plus's Ahsoka.
About Thrawn's return as heir to the Empire.
The book was a feat in the legacy of Star Wars storytelling. With all of this in mind, Tales from the Archives is thrilled to jump into part 1 of Star Wars Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn. So pop some popcorn, throw a force-dampening alien lizard around your neck, and tune in, because if it's not in our archives,
It does not exist.
Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to Tales from the Archives. It's okay, Connor. I forgive you. Welcome back to Tales from the Archives. I'm Grayson of Mortis FM. We're back. Everybody, riff, raff. Who's that guy?
Did you point at me?
I did.
I'm Grayson of Mortis FM. Hi, I'm Will. Hey, guys. What's up?
Who's that handsome lad in the bottom corner?
I'm Seth from Beyond the Dune Sea.
Yeah, he is.
And the bearded man.
And I so rudely interrupted Grayson. I'm Connor from Beyond the Dune Sea as well. I'm sorry.
Well, I believe this has been... Honestly, I feel like I'm really excited about this, not only because I've really enjoyed reading this book, at least the first half of it, but also because I think the stars aligned. It was God's will, fate, whatever you believe in, that this was the book that was chosen in the poll. Because, I mean, literally within 2 weeks of this being confirmed of what we were going to do, we went to ICCC and we had a plethora of tales with Mark Thompson and, of course, the creator, the author of this series, Timothy Zahn. So yes. I'm pumped to finally be doing the coverage of this book.
Hold up. Michael Kramer says, "What's up, boys? Grayson, keep an eye on Seth with a $4.99, or Hannah from the Rayside would say $5 dues."
Michael, thanks for being here, buddy.
Michael, why do I need to keep an eye on Seth? Because he doesn't like.
He's
I'm a loose cannon.
Little guy down there.
It's true. Seth Solo. Is that your salacious beat? That was crazy. That's amazing.
The sound if you're at Spirit Halloween and you step on one of those things and the skeleton. Yeah. That's the sound it makes.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. How many? I can't see how many people we have in the chat, but Will, could you report?
14. We got 14 people. Also, thank you for saying happy birthday for belated me, Michael. Appreciate ya.
Belated me.
Yes. Well, it is quite the delight. Yeah, like Grayson said, to be talking about this. The stars did align.
Mm-hmm.
With how many people listen to the audiobook, by the way? I did half and half myself.
Yeah.
It was read to me by Mark Thompson.
Before we even get into this, I think that Mark deserves an incredible amount of credit for this. Holy smokes. He nails everybody.
He does.
Everybody. It's unbelievable. Like, I would get to a chapter with like Admiral Akbar, and it's flawless. And like C-3PO, it's flawless. Han Solo, flawless. You get to Lando, flawless. It's wild. I don't know how one person could do all of those voices so perfectly. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Mark needs a raise or a promotion, or he needs to be in more stuff, because he is truly like he's incredible.
Thespian.
Say it again, Seth.
He's a thespian.
Yes. Yeah. Like I listen to I want to say I listened to out of the 16 chapters we read, I probably listened to about 5 of them in the audiobook form. I'll be honest, I personally enjoy reading the book first, and then I fully intend, when we finish this series, I will be going back and listening to these as audiobooks, and during drives and stuff, because it's okay, I've already read it, I know what happens, I can kind of turn my brain off a little bit. But I mean, Mark Thompson, everything that he does, like you said, I'm a big fan of his Han Solo. I love his Han Solo, dude. I just think I'm a big Han guy, and it's just any Han chapter with him, I'm like, man, when I listened to the chapter, I think it was chapter 3. We'll get to it in a second, and it's the first chapter with Han and Chewie, and I was just I just had the biggest smile on my face, because I was I felt like I was at home, you know?
Yes. That's how I feel too. And when you, especially in the audiobook as well, it's you have, not only is he nailing everybody's voices, but then the music is playing too.
So good.
And it just feels like,
the sound effects too. It's great.
It's awesome.
Dude, it's really
awesome.
good.
Well, hey, hold on, before we move on, I just wanted to shout out Star Wars Nerd. So kind with the 5 gifts.
Way too kind. Oh. Thank you.
Thank you, homie. Appreciate you.
Get them members.
What is gifting memberships? I'm not a streamer.
So he had to explain this one to me. This is so you know how you could become a member, right?
Yeah.
On somebody's channel. So he gifted 5 memberships to 5 people who are in the chat.
Oh, okay, that's really cool, dude. Yeah. I just sent him. He bought a comic off me. The USPS failed him, and he did not get it yesterday when he was supposed to, but he'll get it on Monday. So
USPS,
classic.
Well, United Postal Service, Connor.
What's that?
I said that's United Postal Service.
What?
You said USPS it was a question. You were like USPS.
No, I said it I agree.
I was it stands for United Postal Service.
Thank you, Seth. I appreciate the education. US. I had no idea.
PS.
Hey, see you, Michael Kramer. I see you. Off. Thanks.
Take care, Michael.
Bye, Michael.
Seth.
Hopefully, get to check it out later. So before we get into the classic chapter summaries, going bit by bit, I have notes and stuff as always. You guys know the drill if you've been with Tales from the Archives. I think I'm the only person here who has not read this book all the way through at some point in the past. For all of you guys, this is more so of a reread, correct?
Very recent reread. I mean, I didn't pick these up until last year, maybe the year before.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very slowly reading them because I just had the audiobook going while I was at work.
Mm-hmm.
So for all intents and purposes, this is basically the first time. So I'm kind of with you. Yeah. I have not read Dark Force Rising, and I have not read Last Command. Mm-hmm. I know bits and pieces of what happens in there because of how prevalent they've been in sort of the Star Wars ethos for, the last 30 years. But the intricacies of the books, I have no idea. So I'm going to be along for the ride just like you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For people who, you two specifically, you long brown-haired men, rereading the book thus far, how has it been, jumping back in when it's with some space in between,
I think we'll get into it. I like some characters less this time.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. When did you first read the books?
Oh gosh, because I tried when they first came out.
I
remember that, and then and I can't remember. I've read the comics a ton of times, so when all of a sudden, eventually, because they're abridged versions, so I'm I read them at some point. I just don't really remember when that. It would have been I'm trying to think. It was before high school,
okay.
I think. But again, a lot of that was comics though too, and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I got the comic, and there's I would only glance through stuff that I had already read, and I was like, I can see the little pieces of dialogue that they're cutting out, and of course with the comic book, you're not. I mean, you depending on the comic book, but this one specifically doesn't have a whole lot of like inner thoughts for people of like, you know, what's going on, what Mara Jade thinks this way, or what's Captain Pelion thinking about Thrawn and stuff. But it does at least hit the beats pretty well. Yeah.
Gabby, it definitely leaves out parts of the but I mean, it would be pages and pages of Thrawn going like this, looking at art as he's like scolding Pelion. So it's like, think of it as an abridged version with pictures. I mean,
Right.
like, I know that's so silly because it's like, what is, like, I just described a comic book to you, but like, it really is. So
yeah,
it's comparable to like when they do a comic book version of episodes of the live action series. Like, that's kind of the exact same thing, where like a full scene will be like 3 panels on a page. For me, that's where I first figured out what it was. They had all the comics like together at the library close to me, and I was like, "What is this?" And then going through that, it's the same way where like I say a lot of the time when I think of scenes in at least 1 through 6 for Star Wars, I see them in Lego Star Wars cutscenes. When I think of scenes from Heir to the Empire, I hear Mark Thompson's voice from the audiobook, but I see it in the comic panels. So like rereading the book, it's seeing the art from the comics as it's going on.
That's pretty good. Cool. Yeah. Because how late did the comics come out after the book itself?
I think a couple, like 97,
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so like 4 or 5 years. Gotcha. Interesting. Will, how has it been for you rereading? I don't know when you first read them or listened.
I was in middle school when I went through those comics. Used to spend a lot of time at the library after school. But just jamming through those, re-listening to the book as something I try and do pretty frequently. I at least listen to the audiobook, at least like the parts that I love. Like, I know it's at the beginning of the book and we're going to talk about it, but with like Luke and Ben, like I listen to that so many times a year where I'm just like, oh, you know what I should do on a car ride? I'll go back and I'll just listen to it with him and C-3PO and Luke and Ben's Force Ghost and all that stuff. I love it. Going back, I think the coolest part was, and not to brag on behalf of the 4 of us, the coolest part for me was like after meeting Zahn and Mark in Nashville at the con, like reading this from the perspective of being like, oh, now I can, because you can always like put a name to the face of who the actor is or like watching their interviews, but actually spending time and talking to them. And for the amount of time that we actually did talk to both of them, it was very cool to then listen and read their content, what they created for Star Wars fans, with that in mind.
Yeah, it was that we kept saying this. I think we even said it on y'all's special on Beyond the Dune Sea of like, I don't even remember where we even said it specifically, to be honest, but we were talking about like hearing behind the scenes stories and things like that really gives you a greater appreciation for something that you may have not appreciated for in the beginning, you know? Yeah. And if you already did, you begin to love it even more because of all of the effort and the intricacies that were put into it. And I mean, we asked Zahn what felt like endless questions, at least Connor and I, you know?
He basically just camped out at his table for 4 days.
Yeah. He's just like,
Steph's playing cards with Mark Thompson. We're hanging out with Timothy Zahn. It was great.
And they were awesome, right next to each other, so we were just bouncing back and forth the whole time. It was awesome.
This is like, yeah, we could talk to Mark Thompson, and it's like, oh, I got another question for Zahn. And it's like, now what do you think about this? You know?
Yeah,
it was great.
I think the most surprising thing now that we've met them is that the normal narration is not Mark Thompson's default voice.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what blows my mind is that he puts on such a very particular voice with his narration, and that is not his default voice at all.
Yeah,
which I think is crazy.
Dude, I'll pull it up here on stream. I found, I'll have to find it maybe a little bit later, just because I don't want to waste our time here. But I sent it to Will. I didn't save the picture, but it was something to do with Mark Thompson back in 2015, and it was so random. Like, it was such a random thing as I was searching. If people want me to find it in the comments, I'll try to find it real quick. But regardless, yeah, as a first time reader, I'm loving this book. It is one of the quickest books that I'm flying through. Like, I don't know, there's
easy.
Yeah, like I'm just like, it's just the pacing is like, that's one thing that I have to credit Timothy Zahn, is just he is a master at pacing this, you know, like it goes to a chapter with Thrawn and Pelion and all them, and it, like, there's been books in the past where I'm like, oh, okay, it's one of these chapters, let's get through this, you know. This one I'm like, sick, and then we're like, oh, we're back to a Luke chapter, oh, we're back to a Han and Leia chapter, you know, like, it doesn't get boring to me.
The quickest way to my heart is through pacing.
Yeah,
and this book nails it. Nothing
so
can
good.
extinguish my love for something more than bad pacing, and nothing can ignite my love for something better than good pacing. I can overlook a lot of bad if it has solid pacing. And fortunately, this book has both awesome pacing and awesome everything else. So
it's pretty sick. Well, with all of that said, all of that in mind, I figure we'll just go ahead and jump into yes, Will?
Hold on. Sorry. It looks like, oh, wait a minute. Sorry. It says incoming transmission.
Dear Tales from the Archives crew. Ezra Bridger here, aka Mortis FM. And with a tip on how to beat Thrawn, I'd say do not ever agree to his deal. You don't want to play into Thrawn's game, because you will never win if you play into Thrawn's game. So, may the Force be with you all, and good luck.
Sorry, Ezra just wanted to wish us luck for going in to beat up some Thrawn, you know?
Ezra, that was Macho Man Randy Savage.
What just happened? What just happened?
That just blew my mind. Wow.
Ezra Bridger, dude. That's the guy. I mean, he's not in the book, but
he's got a history with Thrawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He knows
Makes
a thing or
sense.
two. 9 years with the guy.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can continue now.
Yeah,
I think
Grayson's over there like questioning his existence, and wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, guys, enjoy the book. We're gonna head off here, and
the notification came up. I had to click it. I'm not gonna not click it.
I get it, man.
Sorry.
Wow.
I need. Okay, yeah. All right. That's chapter 1. Yeah, we're not gonna play into this game. Thank you, Ezra.
Yeah.
Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn, chapter 1. We start with an opening from the Imperials. Imperial scouts are emerging from Lightspeed near the Imperial Star Destroyer Chimera. And they're delivering some info from the Abroa Sky system. Some rebels follow these scout ships, track them down, and Thrawn deals with them using a maneuver called the Marge Sabal maneuver. I have something to bring up about this right after this chapter, if you guys would like to hear about it. The data that the scouts bring has the location of a planet called Wayland. Bad Batch fans, maybe that sounds familiar. Thrawn tells his crew before they go there, they're going to the planet Myrkr. That is Myrkr. And both of these are inherent to Thrawn's plans for the destruction of the Rebellion and the New Republic. This opening chapter is a banger. Like, it is, it really, I think it's such a normal thing for Star Wars stories to open with villains. But I think this one does it especially well. But what I wanted to bring up about at the Marge Sabal maneuver is the first time I heard about this was actually because of the Clone Wars. Have you?
Yes.
Do you guys know about this?
Ahsoka uses it, right?
Yeah. So I didn't know about this till recently. Sorry, I'm still kind of like just like so disoriented right now, dude.
There's just a flashbang.
Yeah. Yeah. So Timothy Zahn is the man because it first appeared in the Clone Wars in one of the earlier seasons. Dave Filoni, of course, you saw in our intro, clearly a huge fan of Heir to the Empire. He put that in because he was like, "Oh, I pulled that." He's like, "It was basically it's like a pincer maneuver. You move the ship sideways. It's like have your belly face towards them, and then the ships fly out from around it, right?" And of course, they're using maybe not an ISD, but at least a Venator Star Destroyer. One thing that's really interesting, maybe one day we'll get to this if there's demand for it, but apparently Zahn explained this in Thrawn Alliances, where he actually got that maneuver like Ahsoka named Marge Sabal was named after a flower from her homeworld.
Yes.
And it's like, so that's why it's like that kind of umbrella, like it's like a flower thing. And then Thrawn like mental notes that, and that's where he gets that from. Obviously this is in a different continuity and whatnot, but
he retroactively got that from her in a different continuity.
And then it's referenced in the Ahsoka show. Because I was thoroughly educated on this because we made a video, funny enough, of that, that when he says that line in Ahsoka when Thrawn is talking to Morgan Elsbeth, and they're talking about how there's a ship coming in, and she's like, he says, "Is this the only ship?" And we speculated, oh, maybe I wonder if Thrawn thinks that Luke is coming with him. And everybody in our comments is like, he thinks it's the Marg Sabel technique. You guys are fake fans.
Really?
Well, I looked into it, and I think that that's correct. I think that Filoni was referencing the Marg Sabel technique in there because he was worried that as her ship was coming in, she would be performing that Marg Sabel technique. And so that's why he was inquiring to the ship that she was bringing in.
Wait, which scene?
This is when the 6th episode of Ahsoka, I believe.
When they arrive on Peridia.
Yeah, when so they're on Peridia, right? And so they know that Ahsoka is coming, and so she is coming in, and they've detected
this is
her
after
ship
they go
through
through like the asteroid field and all that stuff.
Yes, it's all that, and so he has that really worried look where he like looks over and says like, "There's only one ship," something like that. I forget the exact kind of dialogue, but I do think it points toward the Marg Sabel technique.
Well, we are big Star Wars fans too, so maybe they were right.
But I did think that was really interesting because it made me look into it, and I didn't realize that was before I'd read this. I had read it, I just didn't put 2 and 2 together, and so then I looked into the connection with alliances and stuff, and I do think it's a subtle, just little connection between all three, which it's pretty fun. I think
it's really cool.
He's not directly saying it or anything, and maybe that's not it, but a lot of people were pretty convinced, and they convinced me of it, so I think it's pretty neat.
Yeah, that's I think Zahn said this at the panel. He was like, if you give him something, he can make just about anything work. Which is like a testament, I think, to him as a storyteller of like, I mean, we've spoken to him at length, and to other people, he said this in interviews that he really wants to do that story of Ezra and Thrawn on Peridia in that 9 or 8 year gap or something. Any thoughts? Feel free to interrupt me or whatever, but any thoughts on this first chapter? Yeah, go ahead, Seth.
Well, I don't know, Connor, did you have something to say?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I just think it's really neat to open up with a bad guy, as you said, but like, just that, like, so take yourself back to all you have are 4, 5, and 6, and some Han and Lando books. Okay, there's nothing, and I think it's neat that this villain just uses his intelligence, and that's it, and uses his knowledge of races. And I'm like, that's neat, and has still pretty much stayed unique to Thrawn, to him as a character. And so I think that's really what sets him apart, and I think what makes these stories unique, because he's not a dark wizard. If you will.
So he's terrible villain. So
he might be a terrible villain. He just might. He doesn't. That's a pretty big tick on my villains tier list thing.
Hey, well, lo and behold, he gets one a little bit later. So,
Yes, he does.
Yeah. Go ahead, Connor.
I was to say, to piggyback off Seth, I think what Zahn does brilliantly through this first chapter is exactly what Seth said. Imagine yourself in this place. Zahn explicitly, I think, draws that connection between Thrawn and Vader and Palpatine many times. In fact, in this first chapter, Pelion even kind of criticizes Palpatine's obsession with the Death Star, and later Pelion brings up his own idea, in one of these other chapters, and he gets real worried about it. And Thrawn even says, like, "You've served too long under Lord Vader, Pelion." I don't get caught up in those games, And
right.
I think that it's really interesting that Zahn could have easily just done sort of a repeat, sort of kind of just made Jeru Sabaoth, could have made him the main villain, a new Palpatine, and not to criticize it too much, but Dark Empire kind of does this, right? Where they just they recycle ideas. Now, Dark Empire has a lot of unique ideas, of course, but but he takes a huge risk right in the first chapter, and he says, "This is the kind of book this is going to be. It's not going to be a retread, but let me get you up to speed on who this guy is, and show you why he's a force to be reckoned with." And I think it's a really great start to the book.
I think Zahn has said somewhere, maybe it was even at the con, I don't know, he said it multiple times, of like he wanted a villain that inspired like fear and loyalty, like because Vader, it's that physical like man in dark black armor, right? But it's like this is someone who is not only a tactician, but he inspires loyalty to the Empire, especially when they're in disarray. And I mean, for lack of a better comparison, he's essentially the Empire's Sherlock Holmes. Like that's, and I believe either he said or many people have drawn these similarities that him and Pelion are essentially Holmes and Watson, but for the Empire, which is
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about that.
That was always how I was presented with it. Like even as Star Wars Explained way back in the day when I first was learning about Thrawn and stuff, he was like, Pelion is his Watson, like that's they're just, Imperial bad guys. And I was like, that's really cool. I like that a lot. So the first chapter is really cool. And immediately you're still like, what's he cooking, man? And that's just kind of a running theme throughout the book is the layers peeling back of Thrawn's plan. But it's a really compelling opening. So yeah. Chapter 2. We open with Luke Skywalker, and he speaks in a dream with Ben Kenobi, who basically says that his Force ghost his essence, his spirit is moving on or dying. It's kind of unclear. And Luke, he awakens in his room, and he's in the Imperial Palace on Coruscant. And he wants a breath of fresh air. He goes up to the roof, and Leia senses his distress in the Force and sends 3PO, and him and 3PO have a conversation. And in this conversation, it's revealed that not only has Leia been training in the Force, because this is 5 years after Return of the Jedi, but she's also 3 months pregnant with twins, which I did not know going into that. So when that happened, when they talk a little bit about teases of like, her having morning sickness, I was like, she pregnant? And then I was like, whoa, she's pregnant. I was like, okay, I didn't know that. Obviously, I know she has kids later on, but anyway, Han. We jump over to Han on Tatooine. Leia's having some worries about what's going on with Luke, and Han is away. And Han is on Tatooine, back where we first met him in A New Hope, and he is attempting to hire smugglers that he knew back in his proper smuggling days, to start working honorably for the New Republic to help transport cargo, because they're kind of in a roadblock when it comes to getting out goods and things like that to different parts of the galaxy. He speaks with a guy named Dravis, but then he inquires about who has taken over Jabba's place in terms of the hierarchy of the criminal underworld, and it is a man named Talon Card, and that's kind of where that's left off in that chapter. Real good chapter, guys.
Dude, it's the best of the book for me.
Yes.
Really?
I agree.
It's real. It's really good. I mean, when I first started reading it and I got to this, I was just like, yes! I was like, because, you know, we're all Luke fanboys. At least, Seth, are you a Luke fan? Do you like Luke? You like Luke Skywalker?
No, he hates Luke.
Yeah.
He's more of a Han fan.
Okay. Hey, I like Han as well. Luke. Han and Luke are right next to each other for me. But anyway, yeah, me being someone who I've been craving like Luke Skywalker content, and there's I would say an absence of that, at least in what would be this time period in canon, other than say Book of Boba Fett or Mandalorian. And so going into that, that's something that I was really excited about. So immediately jumping into this chapter I was excited about. The question that I have for y'all, and immediately what came to me, is this concept of Force ghosts moving on or possibly dying.
I hate it.
Oh,
I don't. I actually think that it's okay. I think that because what he's saying is that his spirit has lingered too long and he needs to move on, and so it's this idea that like it's not that his ghost is dying or anything. It's that his Force essence is sort of assimilating itself on the mortal plane, right? But he's been doing it too long. He's like, hey, like I can't. It's about time I actually move on to, you know, being one with the Force. I'm not quite there yet. I've been helping you out all this time, and I'm growing thin, you know. So now it's time for me to move on. I like the explanation in canon as well, where you know the Force ghosts can just kind of exist eternally because they are one with the Force and they found that way to sort of create their being. But this is a sort of a more spiritual way to look at that, I guess, where Ben Kenobi had to really focus his energy into manifesting his spirit to help Luke along his path. But, you know, it is time for Luke to, you know, take a step on his own here, you know, because he had been all the way through the original trilogy. And I think that this is an incredibly smart way to not only have some nice callback and help you get the feel for the OT, but also show that, hey, Luke is about to take that first step into being his own man. And he doesn't have Ben Kenobi to rely on anymore. So I think narratively, it's very smart. Right. Lore-wise, and I think it makes sense, even if it does grit a little bit against current canon, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Will,
I couldn't tell whose side you were on. What do you think about this?
So I love it, but because Grayson, I texted you a while back and I was like, I have a question for you guys when we get on stream. This made me like Luke, and only upon this part of reading, which when you were like, oh,
I know what you're about to say.
In Last Jedi, it made me a little bit softer on the Force projection thing, because originally I was like, there's that joke of like in Last Jedi, like Luke worked so hard to turn into a ghost and then he just dies from being tired. Like, that's the joke. But here, where Ben starts to, this is the first time I was listening to the book and I was like, oh, wait, Force. I was thinking immediately of the Force projection stuff. And then eventually when we end up reading Shadows of the Sith with Anakin and the Force projection stuff there, and then seeing Anakin pop up in Ahsoka with the not really Force projection thing, but him just kind of being around there in her presence, just like the Force ghosts in Return of the Jedi right at the end. The big thing here for me is it really puts the ghost in Force ghost, because in most media, ghosts are in between planes who have unfinished business. And that's what I like here, where Ben's like, my job's done. I don't need to be here anymore. You did what you needed to. You defeated Darth Vader. You brought balance. Now I can go, and I don't need to be here anymore. My purpose is done. And that's why Luke can go on by himself. The same thing for me, Last Jedi, where he puts himself into the Force essence to be able to do that Force projection. The Force balances out, and then he's able to back off. My job here is done kind of deal. I know he does end up popping up in Rise of Skywalker later on as a Force ghost. That's where the Force ghost thing is kind of like, they can kind of pop up whenever they need to now in canon, like Qui-Gon at the end of Kenobi, which I don't hate as long as it works. The big thing for me that I don't want to see is it's not like anybody who dies can become a Force ghost just because they're a Jedi. Like, we all love Kanan. Okay, Grayson? but I don't want, and I know you feel the same way. I don't want to see Kanan return as a Force Ghost in Ahsoka season 2. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I'd love to see it in a different way as like one of the Loth Wolves or something else. And there's a different way for him to do it. But the whole thing is like, they've all been taught, and it gets iffy on the whole Anakin thing, where I know he's the chosen one, and like he can kind of, because he's so OP, he can do whatever he wants, and they teach him in the dying moment, and then he
I was about to say there's a short story about that.
Yeah, that's what exactly like that in it's a certain point of view, right? It's in the Return of the Jedi one, yeah, where it's like they write that in, and it's like right as he was dying, blah blah blah. But like for Kanan, I don't really see, unless it was Yoda popping in and being like, hey, this is how you turn into a Force Ghost, come back later on. I don't really need it. I do like when we see Force Ghosts or like Ahsoka in the World Between Worlds. That's when you get to interact with all of those people, dead or alive, however it is. I do like that aspect, but that's neither here nor there. This is by far the best scene in the book for me as a Luke Skywalker nerd. But this goes to first chapter, second chapter is such a great 1-2 punch to start off this book. It's so, and there's a lot of times where people say this and it can mean different things to everybody else. It's so Star Wars, where right after the original trilogy in the 90s, like to have somebody in Timothy Zahn who can pick up and make Star Wars content that feels almost exactly in a book like it would be in the original trilogy for those. And the prequels aren't out at this point.
Yep.
The whole space battle right at the beginning, reading back this time, it felt like the beginning of Revenge of the Sith for me, where it's that giant space battle, like, and it's all content like compact right in that first chapter. Very cool. You get the new characters. Everything you need to know about the book is in those first 2 chapters, and then you're off to the races. It's so good.
I completely agree. That was my first note on this chapter, is this feels so distinctly Star Wars, and it's hard to explain.
Yeah.
Like there's I think what Zahn does here that's awesome is he does some nice little callbacks. He gets you kind of in the marinated in that sort of Star Wars DNA, you know, like, hey, here's Ben Kenobi, here's Luke, Luke, C-3PO. There's these little references to like Yoda when on his deathbed and things like that. And all of that is just a setup, because this is not going to be how the rest of the book goes. It's not going to be like, you're not going to be sort of marinated in that OT soup, if you will, the entire book. It's just kind of getting you primed. Like, hey, here's our characters. They're exactly as you remember them, and we're taking them on a new adventure. And it's going to be. And I've not read a ton of EU content, I'll admit, but everything I have read, even in canon, I think that Zahn nails the characters more than anybody else has since the original trilogy. I don't think anybody captures Luke, Leia, or Han Solo, in my opinion, better than the original trilogy, other than in these books. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's really good.
Before we move on, I have a thing to share, but I know we haven't gotten to Seth yet, so I'll share my thing after Seth goes.
The only thing I don't like about it is I can see where you guys are coming from, but I get a little bit of like Force Awakens feel with this, where it's like, oh, you just drop us in and you're depowering Luke already. When like, what about all those other stories? Like, okay, Luke's going to be on his own, but like, what if I want to know about those Ben Kenobi stories and stuff like that? So I just don't like, just, hey, by the way, I'm a ghost. Bye. I'm fading off into existence. It's like, okay, I guess he's really on his own, but like, what? So I wonder what they talked about the last 5 years.
Yeah.
There are stories that are set in that 5 years.
Well, yeah, I know Dark Empire's in there and stuff like that. That there are,
no,
but like
Dark Empire's after.
Is it?
Dark Empire's after the Heir trilogy, correct?
I think so. Yes,
I
I'm
always
not 100%.
thought that, but I have no idea. It could be either way.
Okay,
but I think that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. But like that,
I'll research real quick.
It's fine. It's not a big deal. That, but yeah, that's my only thing. I mean, and I like to have them that like, I thought that like, you know, in Empire when Obi-Wan says, if you choose to face Vader, you gotta do it alone. I can't help you in these situations. That's okay for me. Like, that's enough. That, like, they don't have to disappear and go away. That, like, they can only show up in certain situations. Like, I feel like that little piece of dialogue is enough to just put them on the shelf for, like, for certain situations. So I just don't like the whole he's gone now. And then what about Yoda? Did we just didn't even okay.
So
I guess what I like about it, though, like in contrast to what you're saying, Seth, is that like Ben is a vehicle for the audience to know like where Luke was and where he's going. So he's telling him like, hey, you're not the last of the Jedi. You're not the last of the old Jedi. You're the first of the new.
First of the new.
And he's telling him, you're going to find new allies and all this stuff. And I think, again, narratively, it's describing, hey, like this is your first step as your own guy. Like the original trilogy was all about you becoming the Jedi, you becoming your own man. And now this trilogy is about him being his own man and having to reconcile with the fact that he is on his own in a way. It's like he can't have been there forever, Yeah. Because I guess this is where maybe narrative and lore clash a little bit, because narratively, I think you need that. Otherwise, now you have to ask the question: is why doesn't Ben just come in all the time? Why doesn't he pop in and tell him about Jorah Sabaoth? Why can't he be like, hey, Ben, why didn't you didn't tell me about Vader? You didn't tell me there was this other guy out over here. You had to have known him, right? Like, why can't you tell me about him? I think that him going away is a nice cap to Ben's character if you're only looking at the original trilogy and this as its own piece. But also narratively, it sets Luke up to kind of have to deal with things on his own and be his own leader. And that's how I look at it anyway.
Which it's okay. It's one of my few qualms with this. You won't hear me complaining all night long.
I'll give you a complaint I have to this chapter. Hot chocolate.
Yeah,
listen, I love it. I love it. I know it's like it's campy, but I just couldn't help but chuckle, and I was like, that's funny. Like, I don't really care,
it's so goofy to me. It's so inconsequential, but it is goofy to me.
If chocolate was another word and it was like hot, like Rondosis or something, like some weird Star Wars word, I'd be like, all right, it's hot chocolate. We get it. Like they'll sell it at Galaxy's Edge, whatever. But just the fact that it's hot chocolate, it's like, can I have a glass of hot chocolate and C-3PO play Frank Sinatra? It's like,
it's a little goofy.
It's funny.
Okay, I got to bring this up before we move on because you guys, I'm surprised nobody's brought this up. So I'm wondering if anybody knows this. So Coruscant is mentioned in this book, right?
Yes.
Does anybody know that Zahn is the one who came up with Coruscant? I didn't. So I'm the only one who didn't know this then.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
So I have a quote from him. So this is from Timothy Zahn. Just to make it clear, I did not invent the planet. George Lucas had invented the planet-wide city a long time ago. When I was starting the Thrawn trilogy, they told me to coordinate with West End Games source material, and they had it listed as the Imperial Planet. Well, nobody names a planet Imperial Planet, so I thought it needed a name. So I picked a word that means glittering, Coruscant. Apparently, when it came time to choose a name for the films, the prequel films, people persuaded George to go with Coruscant and be done with it. So I felt very vindicated. The tail wagging the dog. It was an honor to be slipped into the movies in this way. So that is a massive movie contribution by Timothy Zahn.
It's a fun way that I figured that out, Connor. When I met Sam Witwer, I brought the OG West End Games book. And I had him sign it because he said in a ton of interviews that like how influential it is and all that stuff. And when I got up to the table, I had him sign that Force Unleashed figure right there, that Star Killer. But then I put the book down and he's like, what? And I said, oh, can you sign this for me? And he's like, you want me to? He's like, I didn't have anything to do. I was like, I know, but it's something that like I didn't know what it was until I heard you talk about it in interviews and all that stuff. And now it makes sense. And he's like, he immediately goes, he pushes the Force Unleashed figure aside and just starts flipping through pages.
Yeah.
It was like Kid in the Candy Store. He's like, and then blah, 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 blah. And he immediately goes, and Coruscant. And immediately starts telling that story about Zahn. And it's from that West End Games book.
Yeah.
And so that's the first time and this is last year when I was at that convention that he was at. And it was, I was like, whoa. And I didn't think about it. I wish I had asked Zahn about that. There's so many questions that I wish I asked Zahn.
Yeah, me
now.
too. I've been going through so many.
Every week I think of a question and I go, darn it. I wish I had just his phone number, be like, hey man, can I ask you a question? But no, it's very cool. And just for me, having learned that from Sam Witwer, like at a convention in the same way, like we've learned from Zahn at a it's just very weird about all that stuff, but it is super cool.
Go ahead, Seth.
I was just reading rebelscum.com says that Dark Empire takes place in 10 BBY and the Thrawn trilogy takes place in 9 BBY.
You mean ABY?
Or ABY, sorry.
Yeah. So I think it's within a year.
Bad. I thought that Dark Empire and then Empire, I thought that they were kind of intertwined. That it was Dark Empire, Dark Empire 2, then Empire's End.
Yeah.
I
also remember hearing that. Maybe I heard it from you. Maybe you led me astray.
Maybe I'm sorry. I thought that
wish
because the twins aren't born yet at the end of Dark Empire or Dark Empire 2. She has them in or no, they're not even born yet in Empire's End either. So yeah, anyway, whatever. It's okay. Let's go on to chapter 3.
Chapter 3.
Yeah. Well, I was going to inject a little bit of my thoughts in the Force Ghost thing because I didn't really get and mine is I'm somewhere in between. I like the narrative reason why. I personally kind of chalk it up to I can kind of liken it to how Force Ghosts kind of work in canon, where it's like I think it was at that point like I could see. We think about Qui-Gon and Kenobi of like, oh, you simply were not ready to see, right? I view this as the inverse, where it's like, there is nothing left I can teach you. Like, truly, like, and because, and Yoda, obviously Yoda hasn't shown up. And I think about I thought you were going to bring up Last Jedi, Will, with Yoda and the way Yoda pops up.
Yeah.
Because the way Yoda pops up in that movie is like, Luke hasn't seen Yoda ever. Or like in a long time, right? Like,
that's what you assume.
Yeah, because he's just like Master Yoda, like it's, and we don't really. I don't think we ever know when the last like he spoke to Yoda as a Force ghost, and so that kind of
Return of the Jedi.
That's what I'm saying. That's 30 years prior, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like
USPS.
USPS. He saw him 30 years ago. You think he just like smiled then just left? Here's your dad.
Little green guy. He plays with stuff with his mind.
Well, it's like
this adds context though to Force Ghosts a little bit, where it's they don't just pop up. They're not just like a Deus Ex Machina where they just pop up and solve problems. I think that they only can pop up, like what you said with Kenobi, when you're ready to see, when they have something to impart. But like Grayson said, when they have nothing left to impart, what reason do they have to continue popping up? And so like they don't just pop up to like have a cup of coffee with you.
Right? But I don't like also thinking of them as like there's some sort of crazy college professor that's all like the only question on the final is what didn't you learn this semester? I don't want that. Exactly. Figured we'd have class out on the quad. Join me.
That's
so taking a hacky sack.
Yes.
On the flip side, I will say initially, what this did remind me of is the dark side ending of The Force Unleashed with the Tatooine level, where where Starkiller kills Old Ben and then kills Old Ben's Force Ghost.
Yeah.
And I was like, is that what's happening? Did Starkiller just be like, I'm gonna kill you again? But I truly think it's more of a thing of like, and there probably is something down the line where Ben shows up again. I'm almost certain of it. Like, I'm sure there's probably a thing where he's like, oh, maybe he's not fully gone, but for all intents and purposes, it's like he ain't going to be showing up, It
almost happens even in that chapter where he's like, hey, see ya. And then Luke says something. Mm-hmm. And then Ben like almost pops back up. He's like, well, hang on now. Let me correct you. Like, I don't remember what he says. What does he say?
I've got it right here. He says, but Ben turned, the image faded, and in a dream, Luke knew he was gone. Then I am alone, he told myself. I am the last of the Jedi.
Yeah,
he seemed to hear Ben's voice, faint and indistinct, as if from a great distance. Not the last of the old Jedi, Luke. The first of the new.
Yeah, it's almost like Ben he left. He was walking out the door, and then Luke said some pouty thing. He's like, okay. Well, no, you're not the last one. Chill, but that's what it makes me think of is like if he ever needed a new lesson to be learned, maybe he could pop back up. Why not?
Maybe.
Right.
It's just like Yoda. Yoda's like ready to die. He's laying down. He's like,
yeah.
It is kind of like that.
yeah.
And then he
Okay,
like wakes up.
chapter
He's
3.
like, yeah, chapter 3.
We gotta move on.
Yeah, we do got to get a move on.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry. There was one last thing that I wanted to bring up. We had just finished The Living Force when I started reading this book, and there was a really cool line that I just thought was so Qui-Gon coded, which is basically the entire lesson of The Living Force. I even talked to Mark Thompson about this, but he's talking to 3PO, and Luke says governments and entire planets are important, 3PO, but when you sift everything down, they're all just made up of people. In other words, a Jedi can't get so caught up in matters of galactic importance that it interferes with his concern for individual people. And I'm like, that literally is the entire mantra for The Living Force. So Luke and Qui-Gon, 2 peas in a pod. That's all I'm saying.
True.
Chapter 3, we mentioned Talon Card. Well, we're starting off with him.
Guys, can I say something really? Well, never mind. You read it. I want to. Yeah.
Okay. Talon Card speaks with his kind of chief resident smuggler, Mara Jade, about a promotion. She is sensitive to comments about the Emperor's death and has a cold disposition to the name Skywalker. Pelion abruptly arrives on the planet, at least in a Star Destroyer, looking for the native creature, the Isla Miri. Talon Card offers to help transplant it from the trees as a kind but watchful gesture. And that's all for chapter 3.
So I love Talon Card in the audiobook because he sounds like Puss in Boots.
Yes, he's got that Spanish accent.
He does.
Like, come in, Mara. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's cool.
I didn't know that I needed to talk to you.
Do we
Talking about Last Jedi, it sounds like what's his name?
DJ?
What? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The dude in who they have to go find on.
Was it Benicio del Toro?
Yeah. I just like I think Mark Thompson's just doing an Antonio Banderas. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
I was thinking about the
I mean,
promotion for
I don't know if you guys saw in our video or not as well. Did you see who is the physical portrayal of Talon Card?
Bro.
I didn't notice that until you pointed it out, but yeah.
Yeah. For the CCG, the customizable card game.
Yes, that's what that Mara picture was from.
Yep.
It was Talon Card.
It's
Who
Timothy
was it?
Zahn.
Was it really?
It's Timothy Zahn.
It's him in the they used him for the I don't know how they got it.
Yeah.
But
It's
I wonder
cool.
if I can pull it up.
I was about to say, please pull it up. You can just look up Talon Card, and he is the official image for
Yeah, if you
Talon
typed
Card.
in Talon Card CCG, I bet you could find it.
And there's a card with him, Mara, and then Corran Horn. And Corran Horn looks nothing like what I imagined him to look like in terms of... That's a whole different thing.
Talon Card doesn't look anything like I thought. I started reading the comic not long ago. I don't know why. I pictured him like Vizago from Rebels, like something like that.
You thought he was an alien?
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah,
I just thought he had like horns or something. I don't know. I don't know why. There's nothing to describe that. Yeah, I think that's so fun.
But that's fun stuff, right? Is in the books of being able to imagine that, and it's like, oh well, okay, but yeah, there he is.
Because Mark Thompson kind of sounds like Vizago a little bit, right?
He does, yeah. Is his name Sakatro Vizago? Anyway, chapter 3, pretty cool. One of the very, very, very few times that Mara Jade shows up in the book thus far. Yeah, I texted Will on the side, and I was like, dude, is Mara Jade in this book, bro? That's not like that's. I just was like waiting. I'm like, when is like,
yeah.
But that being said, if I were reading this not knowing who Mara Jade was and reading this for the first time, I'd be like, who is this chick? Like, the suspense would be so cool. Like, and it still is, like, putting myself in that mindset. I'm like, man, like, I'm sure whatever I don't know how this reveal will happen or whatever, but I'm like, I've kind of got a semblance once we get towards the end, the chapter 16, kind of got an idea, but it's cool stuff. Very good stuff.
I mean, you have to wonder, I think, as a first-time reader, why is Zahn dedicating an entire chapter to these two characters?
Yeah.
You know, like, and I think that's fun to look at that and like, oh, something's here, you know, we're building to something. And of course the breadcrumbs of my gosh. Oh, sorry. I'm like a little sick, guys. I apologize if I sound like that. And I just had like to sneeze really bad. Anyway. But yeah, the breadcrumbs of her with Palpatine and Luke, like, and there's something there, and it builds really well.
Yeah,
throughout the whole book, it's really cool.
I forgot to point out when we were talking about the end of chapter 2. This is just one thing that I love about chapter 2. Forgot, but it's in my notes. I love that Wedge is the backup guy.
Oh yeah,
that's one of my favorite things, because Wedge is extremely underutilized, I feel like, in a lot of Star Wars media. But it's cool that like Han needs somebody. He's like, okay, obviously Han needs Chewie, but who else is he going to call? Hey, Wedge. And
Wedge, come over here.
In the comics, there's the panel of them like afterwards, and Wedge is like kind of down on himself that he wasn't like intimidating enough, and Han and Chewie are standing with him, and he's in the middle in his X-Wing pilot suit, so it's wet. It's just it's awesome. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out because that's one thing I love about the second chapter too.
It's also cool. I didn't know this, that Dennis Lawson did the original audiobook.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't know that either.
Before Mark.
It's I think it was the abridged version. That there was never an unabridged version until Mark did it, but he did the abridged version. So, which is cool. Yeah, very cool. Really cool setup here. I don't know. I'm gonna just go ahead and say, you know what? I'm gonna leave you for suspense because it's gonna be in this next chapter, chapter 4. The Chimera arrives at Wayland in search of a mountain that has a vault of the Emperor's possessions. They land at a town, a little city at the base of the mountain, in search for the guardian of the mountain. After they kind of land in the square and they start threatening people, they attack a house. An older man shows up and guides them to the crypt where they find the guardian has been dead for some time, which I'd like to talk about this in a second. This old bearded man spontaneously attacks them with the Force, and as soon as his Force lightning reaches Thrawn, Rook, and Pelion, it just stops, fizzles out in its tracks. This is because the Ysalamiri has a innate ability to suppress Force abilities in kind of in a bubble, if you will, which is So it's like right, which is kind of that's a controversial thing as well. We'll get into that in a second. But they end up negotiating with the man who they find out, or Thrawn deduces, is Jor-Us Sebaoth. And there's a little bit of stuff going on there as well, as they need his abilities to help focus their fleets. There's a lot going on here. We gotta break this down.
It's so good.
Yeah. Yep. And there's something I have to tell you about that, Connor, because I know you like this part. So Sabaoth does not seek power like the Emperor. So Thrawn instead, he gives the proposition of bringing the Skywalkers to him, because what does a Jedi want to lead more, or a dark Jedi want to lead more dark Jedi or Jedi? And Pelion is hesitant, and he's kind of the skeptic in this book. Pelion's kind of like, but he's going to go along with Thrawn's plan, and that's chapter 4.
Dude, what a cool chapter! What a cool chapter.
Banger chapter, dude.
You know, like in a video game, especially one you played before, like you replaying a game, and you're like, man, this is that mission where I don't really want to do it. This book has none of those.
Nope.
None of those missions. Like every single thing that happens is fun. It's so cool. I love the introduction of the Ysalamiri. I didn't talk about it earlier, but when they're talking about how the Jedi had no interest in this planet, and why was that? And Thrawn deducing these Ysalamiri and what they could do, and then they getting there on Merkur, getting the Ysalamiri, and it all builds up to this. And it's like you have these just little buildups and payoffs. But I think what's awesome is that you get payoffs pretty frequently throughout the book, and I think that's what makes it so satisfying to read. But you keep the big mysteries alive. So like what we just said is Mara Jade, what's going on with her? But now we get to see what the Ysalamiri do. We just learned about that. So you're getting these little payoffs and satisfactory moments. And what I love the most about this chapter is it feels like an inversion of meeting Yoda on Dagobah. because you have this kind of like goofy old man who's there, on Wayland, and he has the control over the city, or you don't know that, I guess, yet. But then he reveals it like, I rule this city, and I love Thompson's portrayal of Jorus. It's so good, especially when he says like Grand Admiral Thrawn. He spits that out all the time. It's so much fun. But yeah, I love the again, keeps revealing, and then when you get to Tantus and he reveals that he's the guardian of the mountain, you get the big action set piece of him throwing the force lightning. But then you reveal that he's going to go get this cloaking technology, but some other insignificant piece of technology. And it's another buildup, and it's another setup. So we don't get to leave the chapter without another little piece to keep you wanting to keep reading. Because what is that? What's the other almost insignificant piece of technology that they found, which is really fun. I love that it just keeps you going. And this character is incredibly fascinating to me, Jorus. Another fun fact: did you guys know this was supposed to be Obi-Wan, a clone of Obi-Wan?
I did read that. I read that it was that he wanted. That. Yeah, he wanted it to be a clone of Obi-Wan.
I think George axed that idea. But
I think they wanted to be pretty strict on it not being legacy characters, or like to not have a clone of a legacy character. And this kind of goes into, we'll get it a little bit very soon, of something that you posted on your page recently, Connor, of the clones and the Clone Wars and what that was. And it's these little teases of you kind of having to speculate what the Clone Wars were without being too heavy-handed about it. And that's very interesting. So the first thing I want to talk about is, just because it was kind of unclear to me, the Guardian of the Mountain. Who was the Guardian of the Mountain? Because it doesn't really say.
Yeah, I don't think it was Jarus. It doesn't really make sense for it to be him. Well, I guess it could be, because Palpatine would have created him.
You think so? Jorus as opposed to Jorus?
Yeah, no. I always assumed it was the original, and then the clone took his place. Granted, I haven't read Outbound Flight.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's interesting. I guess I always took it as. I guess the sarcophagus could be ceremonial, but if they blew up the whole ship, there ain't nothing to bring back to Barry and Tantus.
But doesn't Thrawn say that he killed Jorus? That he was the one that So,
he would know theoretically,
right.
Maybe though, maybe he wouldn't know. Well, but he never saw them face to face. I don't think he just blew up their ship.
Okay.
Probably just heard their name. So. That's interesting. I'm not quite sure who that could be, but my guess is that Jorus, the clone, has to be I think he was appointed there by Palpatine. I think that's the only thing that makes sense. And then he kind of got his power hungry in his own way, obviously, because he's not power hungry in the same way Thrawn is, but he became power hungry after the death of the Empire, the fall of the Empire.
Right.
And got to kind of consolidate everything to just Wayland.
That's the really interesting thing is, Will, did you find a development?
So this is the ForceNet presents Jedi Council forums. This is from a 2003 inquiry on this website that has a bunch of hits on it, underwords. The story that I heard originated was that Jorus Sabaoth was indeed the Guardian, and that as his clone's insanity grew, he created two separate and distinct personalities. The Guardian of the Mountain is who he was whenever Vader or the Emperor was around, and in that guise, he was always the obedient servant of the Empire, but during times where he was alone at the facility, he became the great Jedi Master Sabaoth with all the illusions and stuff in his head about the Force and such. And that when he either sensed via the Force that Vader and the Emperor were dead, and that he had the battle against the Guardian with his Jorus personality winning out. And then it says, is that the generally accepted premise of what happened? And then there's like a ton of people underneath going, yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah, that's what I heard. Yep, that's it. Like all up underneath it. So I guess the Guardian of the Mountain, him destroying the Guardian of the Mountain was like a Bruce Wayne defeating Batman sort of deal.
Is it like a Anakin Vader thing of like, you didn't kill Anakin Skywalker, I did kind of?
This sounds like it might be a more literal, like split personality type thing.
Yeah. That's what it sounds like rather than it just like, that's the old me.
So, but I mean, but that is kind of the assumption that there's actually nobody in the coffin.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
Maybe because Jorus is crazy. He built that. I killed this guy.
Right.
That ain't me anymore. I used to be that guy.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, because it is just it just says it's a large rectangular block of dark stone in the center with candles surrounding it. So you don't really see.
My list of questions to ask Timothy Zahn.
Yeah, there you go. We got to start asking them. Prep for next ICCC. Yes. Okay, that was the first thing that I wanted to ask about that. The next thing is, what is everybody's take on the Issa Lamiri and their natural abilities to block the Force? Another thing that Seth doesn't like.
Sorry, it just opens up too much of a can of worms.
Right.
That's all. Because like the Vong get really obnoxious, and I know this was like the pathway. So
here's my thing: is then how do you feel in canon about in Clone Wars season 7 the like casing thing they put Maul in to suppress the Force?
I mean, there's only one of those.
At that timeline, but it doesn't mean that apparently there was a lot more in the Old Republic. Bless you.
Sorry.
We're some sneezy boys tonight.
I guess so. I don't know. I'm sorry. Okay. That like it's if there's a couple boxes floating around, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
That like, but an entire planet of them where like you could just go get them. And then everywhere you can have them around their necks.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's what they bring to the table. Because again, I find the Vong crab armor extremely obnoxious later on. And I know that this was the beginnings of that.
I personally don't know much about the Yuuzhan Vong when it comes to what they can do. Is that something?
They can shrug off pretty much anything. And they're pretty lightsaber resistant on top of that. So it's just annoying. And so I feel like that it's cool that like Thrawn gets this thing, but I don't like the can of worms that this opens up to everything else.
That's the take that I always hear is that if the Force is something that is permeating through everything, it is going through all living things.
Beings.
Then how is like a living being doing that is very antithetical. And I think you're right. It does open a can of worms.
Is it? Because I don't think that they're creating like an anti. I think they're just maybe they're just using the Force in their own way to push it away.
Yeah, they just push it. That's all they're doing. Like that's why the lightning like arcs around them. Basically,
think about Yoda. Think about Yoda catching the Force. You know, these creatures have that's their innate ability is just to kind of create a bubble. Yeah. I don't think it's anti-Force I would just view it as a Force ability in and of itself.
It's like the same way of like Obi-Wan using the Force to block flames, against Dirge, right? Yeah. Something like that. Okay. I mean, that's what I never have had a problem with it. I was just curious.
I don't either. And my reason is because Zahn sets up here that they're pretty volatile and that
if you like remove them from a tree, you could kill them.
Yeah, they'll kill them. And so Thrawn is only able to get, he kills several of them, right? By mistake, or does he do that? I don't remember.
They skip over the process, basically telling Card is like, let me send out some dudes for you. Let me help you out. All right.
You have to like carefully remove them.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like only a guy like Thrawn, who is intelligent enough to sort of be able to create an environment for these things off world, makes sense. I mean, that's why the Jedi never went there, right?
Didn't they even say as well? Doesn't Thrawn say that planet was like blipped off of, or maybe it was not in the records, right?
The records.
And so that makes sense too, where it's like, okay, these things do open up quite a can of worms. Maybe the Jedi themselves in universe saw that and were like, all right, you know what? We're just going to get this off the table so that our enemies don't even know about it. And that's why it's such a big deal that Thrawn does find out about it. But it's also, these things are kind of weak and volatile on their own. So
yeah. Which also, speaking of the removing them from the trees and stuff, that was something that I never knew, because in so much media, like there's that visual image of either Thrawn holding it in his hands or it being wrapped directly around his neck.
Yeah, it's just chilling on his shoulder.
Yeah, and I've always like, oh, well, that's not right, because he like in the comic book, we talked about this on the phone the other day, that he has a backpack that they're like sitting on this backpack that they're like almost like embedded in, and I've always been kind of like, or they're not on his shoulders, but they're on the top of his chair, like on the big broad side of it, kind of sitting there. And I've always just been like, is that just kind of a creative difference that people have been like, it just kind of looks cooler? Like, Will, I think you made the likening of like, the visual of him holding it in his hands is kind of like the Godfather holding the cat, you know?
Yeah, that's where I feel like a lot of people drew influence from on it, just because like in the technicalities of like how the Force works, I don't think that's the point of this at all. Because like for me, like you said, Grayson, I'm not the biggest fan of if the Force is within everything, the living Force, a being that can repel that doesn't really make any sense to me in terms of like how the Force math works in my head. The way I always assumed it was it was something that it was so Force sensitive that no matter who was using the Force around it, they were dampened because it was almost like a Force sponge where it was sucking in so much of the living Force around it that everything else was just like, oh, I can't even do anything right now because of these things that are just around it. Kind of like a moth light or a mosquito trap where it's just this glowing thing and everything is drawn to it like a magnet. That's the way I always kind of made it work in my head, that there was like living Force around it. And the one thing that's living in the galaxy that doesn't have the living Force within it, I guess. But it's also one of those things where like, it's cool. And if we got another explanation for it, I also like the idea that like, maybe later on down the line, if there was like a weird, imagine we see Lars Mikkelsen with one of these things, right, in canon. If there was an explanation of like, I used to think these things repelled the Force, but now I know how they actually work. Because I mean, he's also not like a scientist. So as much as he is so smart, he's more of an art and battle tactics guy, not really like a animals guy. What's up?
Right.
I will admit, I would nerd out if I saw something like this in live action with one of these things chilling on someone's shoulder and someone shooting Force lightning at them and then like just it arcing around them and then like hitting all the stormtroopers behind them.
That'd be sick.
Yeah, that like it just electrocuting all the grunts basically.
There are 2 Isla Mary statues behind him in his office in Rebels. So
but I mean that's just being tongue in cheek, I think.
But I mean,
there's a reason for it, though. There's a reason for it, though. They don't put it there for no reason.
I mean, they would if they were like very anti Isla Miri, like never going to show up ever. They would not have put it in there. You know?
Yeah. But you also don't know if that's like Filoni being like, oh yeah, it's the Isla Mari, but did you know that the Isla Mari were actually just a mythological being that was the art and depicted in a lot of this species?
That could be too.
Statues.
They were once wolves.
Yeah.
The Isla Loth Wolves.
The Wolf
The Merker Wolves.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, good talk on that stuff. I was curious about that. There are other creatures. I read like this Maul book last year. There was a creature in that was like you couldn't sense it in the Force, but it was still living. Like it was a thing of like they couldn't. It was almost like camouflaged in the Force, where you couldn't like sense it in another room. Which I kind of feel like is an extension of that. I don't remember what it was called, but
I like stuff like that though. Like that. It's not always like the Jedi know where everything is all the time. Like it's cool to throw something at them where they're like, oh, what does this? It's also so different. And like we were saying earlier, as much as it is like, it's weird, feels very Star Wars to me.
It does.
It feels very like weird original trilogy. Let's just throw in a curveball for Luke Skywalker to deal with. It's cool.
It is cool. Yeah. The other stuff that I want to talk about in this chapter will be more heavily addressed in future chapters. So why don't we go and dive into chapter 5 and 6?
Chapter 5.
The Mark Thompson way.
Should we catch up with the chat? Or
yes, we absolutely should. I'm so sorry. I've been keeping. Bad. Yeah, let's catch up with the chat.
Oh boy, where are we? Metroplex is here. He says, "What goes on, party?"
Hello.
Divided Skywalker says Talon Card is my fave character.
SP is that like the Power Rangers? Oh,
spelling.
Oh,
USPS.
Talon Card SP.
He just flips now instead of being sideways.
I was about to say it's like a Game Boy.
I think this is in reference to either Zahn or Mark Thompson. Gabby says, let's get him on the next Tales stream. Also,
we'll work on it.
Would love
We'll
that.
try.
But also, Gabby, just shout out to you because you are constantly like writing for Tales of the Archives on social media, like getting tagged and stuff, and you being excited about it. Saw today say that we are the best book club. We are,
What?
We are. Okay.
We're the best book club?
I can't think of any other book clubs other than Oprah's, and I think we're better than Oprah's.
Well, if you're comparing us to that, then I think we got it.
Oprah, what are your thoughts on Isla Mary?
She don't know.
I know.
She don't
not.
like. She don't care.
You get Isla Mary, and you get Isla Mary.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Basically
Talent
throwing
jumping on the couch like Tom Cruise. When I started reading, I had no idea this book was about Luke, Han, and Leia. That's
really.
But that's a fun. Imagine going into it being
What a
like,
nice surprise.
at least for me, Luke Skywalker. Like,
Well,
that's
because
awesome.
I guess the stigma around this trilogy is like Thrawn, and you're like, oh yeah.
Hey, look who it is!
It's Tony.
Is this where all the handsome men went
You
tonight?
could have been
or-
reading this book with us, but you slacked.
Yeah, whatever, dude. What do you got? What do you got? A stream or a video or 30,000 other videos to make or something?
By the way, this is the great time to announce that this is actually Rebel Collectors episode. I'm just kidding.
Oh my god! Yeah, we can do whatever we want, Tony. This is from Guest. This could be YouTube. Just the president of YouTube. I just finished the whole trilogy for the first time a few weeks ago, and it's some of the best Star Wars I've seen in a while. Don't know why I haven't read it sooner. See,
Dude,
it's
I'm
fun.
with you.
Facts. I remember I was telling Will a while back, like probably like months ago, and I was like, man, I can't wait to read Heir. And he's like, at this point, you need to just read it yourself, dude. And I was like, no,
Yeah,
I'm going to wait till we all read it together. Like,
it's so good, dude.
it is very
It's
good.
fun. And then going, it's what's, I mean, and I know we're like talking about chapters right now, but one thing that makes Heir so much fun is because, I mean, it came out in the 90s. So like, there's been so much that goes back, like retellings of the stories and the audiobooks and the comics, and seeing it in so much other media that it all kind of like the original trilogy and even the prequels for me, every other iteration of how you consume that story makes it better, even for like when we talk about like the original trilogy, and that means specifically the original trilogy, but like the stuff that was like tongue-in-cheek kind of making fun of it, like the Family Guy stuff, or like Star Wars, how it's like every form of media around it, or like the Dak and Binks, like that kind of stuff where it's like Tag and Binks or whatever the heck.
Tag and Bink, yep.
Yeah, the comics, like that kind of stuff where it's like making fun of it and making light of it. It's awesome. And not to say there's a lot of Heir to the Empire stuff with this, but like we had it in the intro with like George and the Seth Green thing of like him joking around about not liking Mara Jade. Like,
right.
It's it makes all of it better because we all appreciate it, and it's, at least for me, it's easier to appreciate something, and it shows how much you like it when you can make fun of it. But just with this specifically, like with the comics and even toys and the audiobooks and every other way that you can consume it, it's good every time, and it just makes going back to the actual source material even that much better.
Oh yeah, yeah. To see the legacy it's left.
And
Chapter
the
5
last comment I'll bring up is Adam Gilbert says chocolate milk in Star Wars. Okay, we can move on.
I think it's called brown milk. I don't know. Sorry.
Rancor juice.
Chapter 5. We go back to Han. He reports to the New Republic Council, like inner council, what the smugglers have said. Most are hesitant or distrusting. Admiral Akbar and the leader of the Bothans, I believe it is Borsk Felaya. What a tongue twister. They bicker a lot. Borsk Felaya is kind of like the Senator Ziono of this. Like, remember him from Ahsoka, where he was just kind of like the op senator? That's basically what what Felaya is. And then Mon Mothma's like, let's chill, guys. Leia and Han, they briefly speak because he's been gone for a while. And then they're kind of sent on an errand to meet with the Bimi Asari about joining the New Republic, with Luke attending as well, because the Bimi Asari have a very high respect for the Jedi, and he's really the Jedi, only Jedi out there right now. So he's a little bit of a celebrity. Any thoughts on this before I kind of go straight into chapter 6? I kind of feel like this is maybe like a package deal.
Yeah, this is pretty quick. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just like, I mean, you kind of covered everything right there. There's that dude who's sort of the antagonistic senator, but I like how Han is advocating for Leia, trying to become a Jedi. Like, hey, you're talking about needing Jedi, and she's right here. She could become one.
Yeah.
And you're too busy sending her off on these missions. So there's a lot of cool stuff. But I mean, like you said, it's kind of a package deal with 6.
Right. Yeah. It's very, very set up. And the coolest thing is that, like, they're kind of like, oh, it'll just be like old times, we'll all be back on the Falcon going to someplace, Chapter 6, I put the OT cast makes it to Bimasari. Chewie and R2 stay on the Falcon. They are greeted by the Bimasari, or the Bims, which, by the way, one of the Bims was in The Living Force. We talked about that with the last book. They're greeted, but Han is forced to put his weapon on the ship, which is kind of sus. But they don't make Luke put his weapon away, aka his lightsaber. They walk to the. Say what?
You wouldn't take a old man's walking stick away from him, would you?
Is that what he says?
No.
I was about to say
reference.
Okay. Reference. I was about to say, I was like, I don't remember that being in this, but I do remember hearing that. They head towards the city, and they meet the council in this building called the Tower of Law. It's the kind of this big, like, spire in the middle of the city. And then next to it is this marketplace that's kind of been there for a long time. This big open kind of dome structure, multiple levels. But one of the Bims informs that one of the counselors is ill, so they're like, "Oh, why don't you go take a look at the marketplace?" While Luke stays to look at some Old Republic relics that he might be interested in, looking at, archiving for Jedi stuff, whatever. So Han and Leia, they go to the 3-dome. I put 3-dome marketplace. I think it's like the 3-level. It kind of flucy on how to imagine it, but they go to the marketplace before spontaneously their guide disappears, and they're cornered by these mysterious alien warriors in the crowd, almost surrounded. And I remember at the very end of it, Leia she senses it ends right here. She's like, they've got Luke too. They've got Luke surrounded, which is a really cool thing. I really love the play from the original trilogy of that connection between the two, where, like, I've always really liked, and I think the sequels did this kind of well with, like, the dyad thing between Rey and Ben, where you get those, like, they do this really quick dissolve where it's not just a hard cut. Like, my first introduction, or I think the first time we ever see that, is in Empire Strikes Back, where Luke is on the hanging from the bottom of Cloud City, and it switches, and he's like, Leia. We have to go, Leia, and we have to go going back, and then you get it with Vader when the ship flies by with Vader. He's just like, Luke, and it goes, and it's just that, Seth's about to be the new Mark Thompson, bro. He does all the impressions so well.
He plays one card game with the guy, and suddenly he could do all the voices.
He's like a Yusel Miri. He's absorbing all of them.
He's sponging it.
But it really cool setup chapter here. Should we go and jump into chapter 7?
Yes, because I think that they go right hand in hand.
Right. Yeah. Yep. The back to back. And I have one thing that I have to bring up in this chapter because I was losing my mind over it. I'm not really losing my mind over it anymore. But anyway, chapter 7, Luke immediately senses Leia's distress through the Force. He tries to run down the stairs and is immediately cornered by these mysterious enemies. They back him into a room kind of nonchalantly before he ends up using the Force on one of their. They're not guns. They're like sticks. They're called Stokely sticks. That are kind of like these almost like these rope launchers that like they can use to set the pressure, and it's very, very interesting, cool stuff. Very Star Warsy. And he's able to use the Force on one of those and get his saber, reach for his saber. He evades them, and in this really cool moment, he gets in this room and he pulls this tapestry down with the Force, and it's like this big tapestry. It turns into this giant mound, and he just like locks in with the Force and just like throws his lightsaber and just all dead. Just like it's really interesting because he doesn't want to have to kill them, but he just gets to this point where he's just like, I'm stuck in this bind. I now have to. Well, I'm glad it's not just like I'm gonna kill them all, you know. then immediately he's like, all right, I got to get down. I won't make it down fast enough from going down the stairs. So he takes one of their sticks, puts the highest pressure on it. This was the moment. I'll keep summarizing and I'll talk about it a little bit more. He uses the rope launcher.
Jump the shark.
What do you mean jump the shark?
It's in a show, Happy Days, where the Fonz jumped over a shark and people stopped watching Happy Days after that because it was ridiculous.
Because it's too far. That's what the
Yes.
expression means.
Did you feel like he took it too far with diving out the window and then using the little launcher?
Yeah, so I have a reason, my confusion behind the physics of this, but whatever. He uses the rope launcher on like the top part of the dome to like swing down and then like lands on the ground, and then he ends up Han and Leia distract some of the BIM. She like uses the Force on this thing of jewels to make all of them like jump on top of him as a protective net, so he can get to his comm and call in Chewie. And Chewie and Luke make quick work of all of these aliens, which we find out are Nogri. This is revealed either in a previous chapter or a later chapter. The same race as Rook. And the party regathers on the Falcon. Han, he's like, we got to go straight back to Coruscant. And he also is very much pushing for Leia needing to train as a Jedi. Like, when we get back, we have to convince them for you to train more. And that's the end of chapter 7.
Can I ask a question just real quick?
Mm-hmm.
In your guys' head, how big are the Nogri?
See, I can't. I always just picture Rook from Rebels. So
why? What's wrong?
In the comics, they're giant.
They're like wide.
They're like
wide.
But they're like crouched down. But they're also like when they're next to Leia in the comics, they're not like Rook from Rebels, where it's like big arms, little legs. Like they're not. They don't look like that, where they're like waist high to Thrawn. They're bigger creatures, like they're like humanoid alien.
But I will say
like Wookiees, right? Like evil versions of Wookiees that they just like hairless. Hair, they have like, that's what I'm saying. Like they're the bad guys' answer to the Wookiees, basically.
Oh yeah, I've never thought of that, but that's a good way to like.
They were Zahn wanted to make these guys Sith.
Yeah, because he didn't know what the Sith were, right? They thought they were like a species or something.
Yep. So he said, Dark Lord of the Sith, the Dark Lord of these guys. And he said that they stopped him from doing that. And he said, and the way he said it to me is just as well they stopped him from doing that because, he liked their explanation better. But
it's when you presented that thing the other day, I was surprised by when you did your video. I, for some reason, swore they say in the council room the Sith thing in A New Hope, and I'm like, am I just dumb? Like, did I just make that up in my head, or is that only from that deleted scene?
Yeah, it's only the deleted scene.
Yeah.
Huh?
Say it.
Did they ever say Sith in the original trilogy?
Nope.
No.
What?
It's in the books though, because
it's in the books and it's in the A New Hope script.
But all we know is that he's a Dark Lord of the Sith. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, whatever that means.
It wasn't actually defined until the prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
So I looked up the Nogri in Legends compared to canon. Their details are much sparser. They are average height is 1.4 meters average. So they are, what is that? Is that like 5 feet tall?
Yeah, something like that.
So they're not like, they're not like short, but they're not like, but they also look way scarier and meaner in Legends than they do. They're like dinosaur looking dudes.
They're kind of like Trandoshan, but black.
Yeah, and they're like, they've got like thick, like these like really thick skulls, and it's cool. So this chapter is really cool. The action is really cool, but I will say it was the first time in the book that I got hung up reading it, where I was like, how does this make sense? And it's because I talked to Will about this. I was very hung up on the visualization of like, okay, the tower. So it's when Luke jumps off the balcony and uses the rope launcher thing. And the book is very specific about when he uses the Force. So like if I was watching it, I'd have been like, okay, was just using the Force to help himself out. But he doesn't say anything about that. And so he's on a balcony 5 floors above the marketplace, the roof of the marketplace. Okay, Will is gonna get so mad at me for this. I don't care.
Get mad. Yeah. It's just so funny how long it took you for like diagramming this out in your head.
So it's like, okay, Luke is like here on the top of this, and he's trying to get down here, but it's a dome. So I'm like, okay, is he landing on the top of the dome, or is he using the rope on the dome so it's actually a little bit higher, and then he's just kind of like, yippee, and just like swinging down? Like, it also says that he doesn't have like this graceful landing. Like, he does kind of this like rough and tumble landing. So I'm like, when y'all were listening to this and reading this, did it make sense in your head where you just kind of like, okay?
I got that shot in Captain America Winter Soldier. Remember when he dives out of the elevator?
Mm-hmm.
He lands on his shield, and you're like, I don't know about that, Cap, but at least you look kind of hurt when you got up. So whatever.
Right.
That's how I took it. That I was like,
I was about to say that makes a little bit more sense because it's vibranium. Like it absorbs all impact.
Part of him, like his legs should be jelly. But
it's taking all of the absorption impact. Oh my gosh, we're in a Marvel podcast now.
Vibranium and Isla Mari are the same thing. They both absorb and repel vibrations through the Force.
Man, I'm going to be the odd man out here. I thought this was awesome.
No, it's awesome.
I like it.
I was just so confused. I was like, am I imagining this wrong? Because they say it's 3 levels, and I'm like, is it 3 domes on top of each other? Is it a dome above 3 levels? I was like, and I went to the comic book,
just like Spider-Man. That's how I picture. Yeah. He was on the window and and he went to the other side.
I was confused because it's just like he's shooting the rope not from a middle point, but from a lower point. So I'm like, theoretically, he would just smack into the side of the wall.
Okay, Skywalker though.
It was cool. I thought like, dude, this whole chapter, these 2 chapters where you have Luke or you have Leia and Han, they're thing through the marketplace, something's up, they have their banter back and forth, and then it ends on that great cliffhanger of, oh no, they've got him too. And Luke's, studying the art and everything. And then, like you said, he's really bothered by the fact that he has to hurt these guys. And he kills them, and he laments the fact that he has to kill them. And that's my Luke Skywalker right there. Like he's, he is going to try every diplomatic solution possible, but when the time comes, he's going to take that sword out and do what he needs to do. And then it all ends with him, and maybe it was the audiobook, because as soon as he gets out there and he hits the rope launcher, it goes the dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
It's so cool. And then but as soon as he lands, the Falcon then comes up behind him, and Chewie's there. I'm like, this is just pure swashbuckling fun. This is awesome.
Yeah,
I loved it. It's my other than chapter 2, this is probably my favorite part in the first 16 chapters. That's so cool.
I'm someone who notoriously, I will like read something and like I build the image out in my head, and then I was like, what? I was like that. I was just very, I'm not kidding. I read those 2 pages like 20 times. I listened to the audiobook and I went to the comic, and I was like, what am I stupid, dude? And I just was like, and eventually I probably have the drawing. I don't have the drawing. Yeah. I like drew it. Like I had it down. Man. I know. And listen, Timothy Zahn is a physicist. So
that's
like
what I said. I was like, I cannot explain this to you, but I'm not going to put it past the physicist.
Maybe you should just ask him.
That's a good idea.
We did ask him a couple questions about things, and he was just like, dude, I wrote that 33 years ago. Like, I don't, so like, yeah, I will ask him, hey, Connor, put it on the, Connor, when you
can't hear you.
I know.
I got to see how the comic book does this.
Oh, the comic, it doesn't even show what he attaches to. They're not even in it.
Does it?
No, they're not. He's on like a roof when he jumps off. He's not on a balcony, and then like he just lands on the ground.
You guys seen Fast 5? I'm just gonna pretend that it's when they're in Brazil. They're running across the roofs, the tin roofs, and they have to jump. I'm just gonna imagine he did that.
For you guys who want to know, this is what it looks like in the comic.
Yeah,
right here.
He's like, he literally is like, wee, like
he's flying.
Dude, it's awesome.
He has like one arm from the rope, and he's like literally like Superman, just like cuts through a guy as he's like.
I didn't notice this. Why is his lightsaber green? Or blue,
you mean blue?
Yeah.
I looked into that. That is an interesting thing to bring up. It's kind of not clear. I think they just. Will, do you have an answer? Do you know about this?
I have absolutely never been able to find an answer to this. That is not just somebody being like, well, what I think it is. It's just like,
man.
Does this go back to issues with like? Well, I was gonna say maybe it was an issue with the color green in the printing, but immediately in the shot, the rope is green. So
yeah,
because I know that historically with comics, isn't that an issue? Like green is kind of a hard color because
that was
gray.
The Hulk,
right? Yeah. I thought it was. Yeah, I was going to say I thought it was the opposite, where the Hulk was gray, and then they were like, "Oh, green," going back and forth. But it's also too like if it is an issue with green, that's funny because it's kind of the opposite of the Return of the Jedi stuff, where like all of the posters were blue, and then it didn't show up on the sand, so then he made it green, like that kind of stuff. I was like, if it's the same thing, that's funny to me.
Yeah, I think it's just supposed to be like a creative interpretation. I don't know, like yeah. Sure. That I like looked up and I was like, wait, yeah, why is that? I also think it's supposed to maybe be an homage to the McQuarrie art, where all of those lightsabers, like back when like you had OG Luke and Vader, and then the Stormtroopers, like all of their lightsabers were like that really light blue white color, because it's almost white in the comics. But but yes, other than my little silly dumb interpretation of like, eventually I just was like, this probably makes sense. I'm just imagining it wrong. And very cool chapters here, and kind of sets the imminent threat of what's actually happening. That there's these people out for our main party. But other than that, I don't have much to say on these chapters other than they're pretty sick.
One final thought before we move on. I love the ending of this chapter where they're in the cockpit of the Falcon. And yeah, well, like you said, Han is saying, hey, we need to get back so you can train to be a Jedi, so we can, Luke's not the only one doing this. And well, I guess two things to bring up. Luke mentions how he could just build her a lightsaber whenever she needed. Like, I can build you one. It's not a big deal. I love how that's changed completely now. Because it's no big deal. He's like, yeah, I mean, I could, whatever you want. I mean, I could throw one together for you. It's not a big deal. Yeah. So I like that. But at the very end, because they're talking about the twins, and she mentions how, here, you're going to have to be doing this again someday. And he mentions how Ben's words echo through his mind about how he thought that he could train Darth Vader just as well as Yoda. And I just like how this continually happens throughout this book, where Zahn will like recontextualize an original trilogy moment and give it new meaning.
Yep.
And here. So that moment where Ben is talking about his own fear about, he's talking about his own failure, rather, right? Like, I couldn't train Anakin as well as I thought I could. It was my own hubris. Well, now that's becoming Luke's fear. And I like that that's sort of a transferent moment where, while Ben is not necessarily present physically anymore, or spiritually, however you want to say it, he is there, I guess, in spirit in another way. But I like how this is now becoming Luke's fear. Like, man, am I going to mess up again? And it's funny, even taking into context the sequel trilogy, or even really this canon, or the EU canon, because it happens both times. He does, in a way, sort of fail and do the same thing with Ben Solo. And then which one is it? Is it Ben Skywalker, or no? It's
Jason
Solo. Sorry, Jason Solo.
It's confusing.
Yeah,
it's funny how they reutilize those names, where it's like, well, Kanan and Hera's kid is Jason, and he's also a Force sensitive kid. But then you've got, originally was Ben Skywalker, and then they're like, well, now it's Ben Solo. But I mean, it's neat little homages.
So anyway, I liked that moment at the end where he always is remembering these moments and sort of putting them in new context. That happens earlier in this chapter too, where he is remembering Boba Fett, his fight with Boba Fett.
The rope.
When he gets the rope wrapped around him, he's like, okay, this happened to me once. How did I get out of it? I don't think it's going to work the same way, but maybe I'll do something else.
Yeah, because cool. These ropes are like this different, like kind of like green, kind of mist stuff. It's cool. And my first experience with the Nogri was in Jedi Academy. There's a level where you go to this planet and the Nogri have taken it over. And they've got they've got the Stokely sticks, and but they kind of use them as like guns. It's like weird. Like they have like almost like this poisonous effect to them. It's very interesting.
Well, don't they poison you? They
do
like
they
give off? Yeah, don't they like?
Oh, they have
get
the
hit, like, gassed, don't you?
Didn't they say in the sticks that they have like a paralyzing effect?
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah, that, like you don't
Yeah.
want to get hit by the mist or whatever.
Because it's not just a regular rope. It's like you get hit by it and you're like, it's like almost, so pretty cool. I always felt bad playing the game because I thought the Nogri were like innocent and they were like, get off our world. And I'm just like, I'm going to kill you all. And now I'm like, oh, never mind. These guys actually are not that great. So, well, at least they're being used for the wrong reasons. But yes, chapter 8.
Chapter 8.
A longer man. If we get Mark on here, he's gonna have to be doing that for us.
Awesome.
That'd be great. Maybe. Chapter 8. Thrawn, Pelion, and Sabaoth, they plot about future plans, including about some of the tech that's in the mountain, and Jorah Us's frustration in the failure of the Nogri. They end up coming up with a plan to isolate Luke and Leia. So Sabaoth will bait Luke out to an unknown location while the Imperials raid a New Republic shipyard to distract them. Then we jump over to the New Republic on another council where Faelia just continues to be a jerk and is like, why'd you guys leave? Blah, 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 all this stuff. Kind of getting onto Han. And then they kind of deliberate why the Saboteurs species is not in the Senate database. Dooku was just wiping out all kinds of stuff. I mean, Camino, Merker. I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's not in their database. And then the council decides to they're gonna send them back the following day with a more significant force to protect Leia. But they don't give her any time to continue training with Luke. So just kind of, lame.
Boo.
Lame.
Not lame. It sets stuff up.
No, not the chapter. I was saying that it was lame that they didn't let her train.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to jump over to chapter 9 because this is just a little bit more, diplomatic. Chapter 9, Thrawn and his forces, they coordinate a simultaneous attack on 3 planets in the Sluis sector with the help of Sabaoth's battle meditation. This was something that Pelion was kind of hesitant about. We'll probably get into the weeds of this in a second. They're able to successfully ambush all 3 of these locations. It was kind of unclear to me if they were 3 planets in the same system or if they're 3 completely different systems, but I think they're all in the same sector. Either way, they're able to kind of basically do a hit and fade attack and it's like four ships, except for one of them is 5 because they've got the Chimera with them. In the middle of this, Mara, Jade, and Card actually watch one of these attacks. I think not the one with Thrawn in them. I think they see only 4 ships, so it's one of the other ones. And it delays some delivery of goods that they have to a client. So this is the second time we see Mara and Talon Card show up. And there's a little bit of again, some more teases with Mara's character. Luke and Leia manage to briefly train. Leia has a lightsaber now. That just happens. And Han and her are called to aid in the aftermath of the assault. So some time has passed. Obviously, they're kind of he's cutting out the fluff of they went to Bemisari with a more significant force. Anyway, they hear about the assault on the Sluis sector. In speaking, they mentioned that the Sluisi, this people there, they don't like Jedi because there was actually some fallen Jedi in the Clone Wars that wreaked some havoc in that sector. And one actually made it as far as Dagobah. So Luke There's this really cool moment that I liked. It's one of my favorite moments where he's training with the remote, but he's meditating at the same time, where he's like having this like out of body experience where he's just like deflecting everything and he's working up this sweat, but it's like he's not even thinking about time passing. And he ultimately decides he's gonna prep my ship. I'm gonna go to Dagobah. So a little bit of a loaded chapter here.
Yeah.
On one regards, I don't really with a lot of the things when I read this book of like, okay, with the Ben Force Ghost or the lightsaber or whatever, a lot of this stuff I really don't mind, because if this was a story made in like modern context with the prequels and all of this stuff, like I obviously would be like, oh dang, okay, she just has a lightsaber now, like that would have been, but in the context of this, of like, okay, in between movies, we just saw Luke, he just had a brand new lightsaber, where you're like, okay, that's fine. You know, like I'm not bothered by it. And like, you're right. Luke could just make her another lightsaber. He doesn't know how to train Jedi. There's no blueprint or template, you know, at least at this point in the timeline of how to end up training new people. So he's like, well, yeah, I'll just make a lightsaber for my sister and we'll just kind of train together, you know?
Yeah.
So
it's very practical. It's just a tool, you know, rather than a sort of spiritual instrument like it is in New Canon.
And I want to mention that in this chapter, and I believe in one of the earlier chapters, when they're talking about Jorah and him being like a dark Jedi, we find out that Pelion actually served in the Clone Wars, and he gives a little bit of hints as to what the Clone Wars were. Is a little bit more heavy-handed than I thought. I'm gonna pull that up real quick. I have the highlight for it here. Let's see if I can find it. You guys can go ahead and speak while I find this. I don't want to go ahead, Seth.
I love battle meditation. I think that is one of the coolest aspects of this book.
Mm-hmm.
I love the idea that Palpatine was field buffing all of the Empire all the time.
There's actually a little bit of a retcon there. I looked into that. It wasn't Palpatine in the Battle of Endor. It was another admiral who had latent force abilities.
What was Palpatine doing?
Palpatine was too busy fighting Vader and
he wasn't
Vader
even fighting.
Luke.
He was just sitting there.
Yeah, but he's focusing on that. His mind is not on the battle.
When does this retcon happen?
Yeah,
I don't
who
like
retconned that?
I'll look it up for you.
Grayson did it. Grayson retconned it.
It's an admiral. I don't remember his name, but they end up finding out that it actually wasn't Palpatine who was doing that.
Admiral Enigma?
That didn't make sense because was he on the Death Star too, and he just dies when the Death Star dies?
No, he's on one of the ships and it gets blown up.
That's lame. I don't like that.
Yeah, that's stupid because, in my opinion, Palpatine's so strong, he's battle meditating everybody.
My problem with it just being Palpatine, though, is that it makes it seem like the Empire will be completely incapable in literally any fight that doesn't have Palpatine, right?
I mean,
so I like the idea that there was some.
Point. But that's the point. Is that's why they need someone like Thrawn.
But then you look at the Battle of Hoth, where they were just completely swept over, right? And Vader doesn't have battle meditation.
No, I take it that Palpatine can battle meditate anything. He doesn't have to be there. He's that powerful. If this is a big deal, he'll battle meditate it. It doesn't matter that he can just do it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. So the use and effect of battle meditation was first described in the Star Wars Expanded Universe by Timothy Zahn in Heir to the Empire, when Grand Admiral Thrawn explains to Jorah Sabath that Gilad Pellaeon, his own theory as to why Battle of Endor was lost. He believed that Palpatine employed the power to an unwise degree, taking such close control to the Imperial forces as to make them puppets, almost incapable of fighting on their own when his influence was suddenly removed. In parentheses, the use of battle meditation on Endor was later attributed to Grand Admiral Niall Declan instead of Palpatine.
Who's this guy?
What's that from? What did that?
Dude, he looks scary. Whoa! That is terrible. Hold on. This guy, can I present? Can I share my screen? I'm gonna... Yeah. Okay. This guy, this is terrifying, dude. You guys see this?
Scary.
Dude, look at this dude's face, bro.
No.
Yeah. He was apparently taken to Droman Kos and was one of the prophets of the dark side or something. What was this in, dude? What? Scary, bro. Grand Inquisitor. Do you see this? Okay. What is this in? This is in. What is this in? Star Wars Galaxy's jump to light speed. Huh?
I don't know what this is.
I don't know. I don't know. Apparently
It's only in jump to light speed. That's the one thing he's from.
Yeah, so I guess they were like, nah, it wasn't Palpatine, it was this guy.
Expansion 1. Star Wars Galaxies. It's in a video game.
I'm sorry. What does this mean? His child, does he have 17,000 children, or is his child named 17,786?
Bro, let's get back to the book. What is this?
He was in a video game. That's where he's from.
I'm just explaining the lore to you, Connor.
Okay.
Here's what I'll bring up. This is from the comics. This is burned into my brain when you talk about battle meditation. Yeah. That is just awesome. And then the panel, he's looking down, he just looks up, Dagobah. I love it.
Dagobah. Yeah.
So
I'm also not, by the way, I was not against the Emperor. I just think it is interesting to be like, oh, it actually wasn't the Emperor. He was focused on that thing. It was some other thing. But I
love the idea that the Emperor, because it's his hubris. He was putting all of his cards on that table, that was it. I'm so powerful that I can commit. I don't need to worry about giving my soldiers good quality of life, good training, good morale, any of that. I don't need to worry about that because I'm so powerful in the Force that I'm just going to put out this bubble, this galaxy-wide bubble that anybody under my command.
Well, it's like, Seth, you play Battlefront 2. It's his dark side aura ability. Well, where he directly inflicts fear and all the other and everybody else, and then boosts. I think he boosts his allies, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then, are you talking about his Force Storm?
Yep.
Yeah. I was going to say that yes. But I love that. That's one of my favorite things that Timothy Zahn introduced to the Star Wars universe.
It's still very prevalent. Avar Kriss in the High Republic is the designated High Republic battle medic. They will arrive on ships. There's this disaster that happens, and she just meditates on the bridge and just is helping all of the Jedi interconnected in the Force, so they can talk to each other and even miles away. It's very cool stuff.
Yeah.
Bastila.
That's all I want to say. Battle meditation's cool.
Yeah. I was trying to find that. Sorry, I completely lost turn. I'm trying to find that thing of Elion talking about his experience in the Clone Wars. Is it in this chapter?
Yeah, I like the idea that there was some dark Jedi on this planet. It's so fun to get those little tidbits about what the Clone Wars were.
Mm-hmm.
You had all these Jedi that fell. It's this kind of happened all the time. Huh. It almost seems like, at least with the context of just this book and with the context of just the original trilogy, that Jedi could kind of go either way, because Vader's called a dark Jedi sometimes, right? And
right,
prequel content. So it's kind of interesting to see there's him, and then there's Jarua Sabayoth, and there's some guys during this mission on whatever this planet was.
I also like the idea that Luke doesn't really, he doesn't know what the Sith are. He just he's just these are just Jedi that go bad. He never really learned about the rule of two or the Sith hierarchy or anything. And it's of course, later on, he's going to learn about that. Yeah. But, and that's, of course, probably stuff that he will learn in future books in the EU. But
well, it's fun just in this context, that doesn't even exist. It's just, they're just some of these guys that go bad because with any good power, there's just not a name to them,
And I was very happy within canon when we finally started getting dark Jedi, when we started getting Jedi that were not Sith, that were just Jedi that had gone Terran Malicos, for example, in Fallen Order, or I would even say Balin is an example, of a dark Jedi, right? He maybe not a true, yeah. In a way, she's still part of it.
Visage, is that what you said? Oh, you said Savage. I was like, really? I don't know.
Yeah. There's others. Man, I wish I could find this. It's taking me a while, so I don't want to put us on a roadblock. But basically, he indicates that the Clone Wars was actually that the Clone Wars was the Jedi versus clones of the Jedi that had gone crazy, right?
Yep.
Which is very cool, and that's kind of why the byproduct of Jorah Oose's one of those last like remaining clone Jedi, like that basically that the cloning process made their brains go crazy, and so that they're like, oh, they go evil. But
well, I mean, when they find out that he's a clone, the Thrawn is unsurprised, and so is Pelion. Like that's not a revelation that they're like, wait, what? A clone Jedi? You know, they're just like, oh, that makes sense.
There's another one.
Yeah,
it's like when like when they find Rex and all of them, Rex and Wolf and Gregor, they're like, oh, just old clones.
Yeah, exactly.
I do think it's funny though. I was looking on for stuff for like the intro video. I was going through Timothy Zahn's Facebook because he's got photos from like every convention, and if you scroll back far enough, he's got the way book covers would have looked for like his version of the Clone Wars, and it's like the Clone Wars logo, but it's all green and it says Luke on the bottom or like Sabayoth on the bottom, and it's cool. I gotta find them. I'll send them to you guys later on. But like, that's just sick. His version of like what his Clone Wars would have been. It's very cool.
Oh, okay. I found it. The part of it. Yes, Pelion says he was created from a tissue. Talking about Jorah Us, he was created from a tissue sample, probably sometime just before the real Sabaoth's death. And then Pelion says early in the war, in other words, and then it says the early clones, or at least those the fleet had faced, had been highly unstable, both mentally and emotionally, sometimes spectacularly so. And that's literally the only tidbit that gives, but it's cool. It's cool stuff.
Yeah, I wish that Star Wars wasn't so hung up on canon sometimes, because I'd love to just have a little Elseworld story about Zahn's Clone Wars, or like what that would have looked like, you know, because I'm sure there's still notes out there all these authors had, you know, from back in those days. Just write that book, man. I want to see that. I want to read it.
Yeah, that'd be such a fun, like, yeah, I would love that, dude.
Dude, that's what I say about animation all the time, is the way like DC does stuff with animation where it's just like Batman Ninja, and you're like, all right, cool, I'll watch that. I would love that for Star Wars.
I mean, it literally like the
kill for that. Like, just have a whole EU line of animation. Make Plagueis. Like, I would. That'd be awesome.
I know you two, and I am as well, fans of Force Unleashed 2, and honestly, this all kind of comes back into play even when keeping in context like regular Clone Wars, of a bunch of the clones of Starkiller were all like not decelerated. They were all like crazy unhinged clones that weren't and that's like kind of feels in lieu to that. They're like, we're going to try to make this work, you know? That's pretty cool stuff. So I have a question. This is in my notes regarding this, and I figured that now's a good time to bring it up. During the Force Awakens days, Seth, you might be able to attest to this. Were there theories that Snoke might have been Sabayoth? That he was like a failed clone of some Jedi?
That's interesting.
I definitely don't remember that.
Because I'm not saying I thought that, because I didn't really know much about Jorah Us. I just was thinking, I was like, oh, now that I'm kind of reading more about this, like I could totally see that being like a direction that people would have thought.
So, no, I'm trying to, like, the big, I mean, do you really want to know the Snoke theory or whatever? Like the big Snoke theory was that he was like an ancient being. That's why he looked that way. And that, like, I had this whole thing that I thought that he was awakened, because, you know, he says there'd been an awakening. Have you felt it? And I thought, like, what could have shifted the Force this much to awaken a being, and that it was Order 66 is what awoke him to begin with, is that huge shift in the Force. And so anyway, yeah, that was the big one, was that he was kind of almost like a Nosferatu-esque kind of ancient evil creature that
cool.
that had been awoken. Yeah, that was the big Snoke theory.
Here's it's funny you say that, Grayson. A post from 3 years ago. This is on Reddit. Anyone else think the Mandoverse is setting up for an Heir to the Empire sort of endgame, especially with Mount Tantus? Just a thought. And then the title of this is Snoke as Sabayoth, where like we'll see it before The Force Awakens with all of that Heir to the Empire stuff.
Wait, what do they mean by that? Like that?
Like the original Snoke? And
yeah,
the-
like the OG Snoke was Sabayoth. Like,
So he
I would
wasn't
honestly
like
love to see if Snoke showed up and was sort of a Sabayoth like presence for Thrawn. Thrawn wants to use him, but Snoke has his own goals for ruling the Empire. Maybe Thrawn isn't fully aware of Snoke's connection to Palpatine. We could also see Luke have a history with Snoke.
My kind of thought process with now that we have the context of Ahsoka, that Joros or Sabath's his whole role in these books, that's kind of what they're doing with the Night Sisters. I think that's kind of what he's trying to do, partially. I don't know.
Yes, I agree.
You think so? Okay. But
I got a question for you guys. Someone in
Yeah.
the chat asked us, "Say, do you like jazz?"
You like jazz?
Something else I was going to bring up, but I'm completely blanking. Shall we move on to the next chapter?
Yeah.
Next couple
Yeah,
chapters?
we gotta keep moving.
Next two.
Yeah, okay, because we got 6 chapters left. This one's a little action-packed one. Fun little chapter. Chapter 10, Leia, Han, and Wedge, they go to the planet that they attacked in the Sluice sector, Bipfosh, or however you say it. That's how I pronounce it, was Bipfosh. And as they do, they're attacked by more Nogri, and a YT 1300 freighter lands between them. But then they realize it's not the Falcon. It's actually
the Falcon.
Yeah, which is a cool moment from Han. Han makes this plan. They all rush up together to like bait them. He goes right underneath the ship and he takes Leia's lightsaber. He cuts the coolant line. And it sends a bunch of gas, like it makes the ship like kind of and sends gas up into the like this coolant gas up into this core phase gas as they call it. While Leia and Wedge distract the Nogri or whoever is on the inside the actual ship. As they do, the smoke from the gas alerts the New Republic the X-wings or whatever, I would assume they're X-wings, to come in. But I also. Yeah, I was confused because I thought he had sent an actual transmission. And I was like, oh no, the smoke signal is the signal, which is cool. And then right after that, the escape pod on the ship, which is interesting to think about because you guys were talking about Solo recently of like where actually was the escape pod on that YT 1300.
Well, going off the OT. They say that in the Falcon, several of the escape pods have been jettisoned. That they may have left shortly after takeoff.
On the Falcon.
They say that in A New Hope. So that's probably what he was going off of.
So I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious if where those other escape pods would have been, because now we obviously have Solo where the escape pod was in the front in between the mandibles. Yeah. But it's like where were I remember I think I have a visual dissection book that has where it's at. I'll have to pull that up and send a picture to y'all. But yeah, it takes off and it's like this loud bang and it made there's this fun little comment where it's like, it's a lot louder. It's like, well, normally it's in the vacuum of space. But right after a few days, they're still on the planet, but Han speaks with Akbar, and he suspects there are people relaying information from the New Republic headquarters on Coruscant as to their whereabouts. So he makes a decision to find a location that has access to be able to make contact with Coruscant remotely, but they want to do it discreetly and under the radar, so they need a person with a list of slicers, and enter Lando Calrissian. So that's chapter 10. Whoa, what do we have here?
There's a weird thing in this chapter that I have to bring up that I wonder if it was a mistake.
What's that?
So earlier, when Thrawn, Pelion, and Sabayoth are talking about their plan to put out information, like they're going to start putting rumors out that there's this other Jedi, right? They say Joruus Sabayoth specifically.
Yep. They go back and forth.
Yes. Whereas here, when Wedge brings it up,
it's because the W, right?
They use the W, which is odd because because when talking to Zahn, he mentioned that the W was more just for reading purposes, but they do say it out loud. Like Zahn's like, note the double pronunciation of the vowel,
because Pelion says Joruus, just one U, and and Thrawn's like,
Yeah, notice the telltale sign of the W. So this means that Wedge had to have said that like out loud, you know, and that Leia did too.
It has to be a mistake, right?
That it's got to be. That's because it wouldn't make sense why you would be talking about this clone, because right here he says he was one of the major Jedi Masters back in the pre-Empire days, supposed to have disappeared before the Clone Wars started. I heard a rumor a couple of days ago that he's resurfaced again and set up shop on a minor world named Jomark. Right, you know, and they keep going. So just a little thing, but I think it's kind of interesting. This a little trip up.
It's also interesting because like the confirmation that we had got from Zahn was that the proper pronunciation of the W in it was Jorah-Us, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's like it's interesting reading that note, having that in mind, and it's like surely he's just like,
well,
maybe
even without the context of our conversation with him, it's earlier in the book they say the opposite, which I think is interesting. I also a thing I do like though in this conversation is when Leia, what brings up Sabayoth is Leia's like, yeah, you know, she's talking about Vader and the Emperor and how they had the ability to kind of reach across space and time to like detect people. And then she says, but what if the Imperials have found another dark Jedi, another confirmation that Vader was a dark Jedi and maybe the Emperor was too, you know, and not a Sith Lord. And I think that's I love this prequel content. It's so much jargon. Fun. It's really cool.
Yeah. It's I even put in my notes on that same note. I just put, I was like, Luke and Leia address Palpatine and Vader as Dark Jedi. Interesting to think that they don't find out that they were Sith until much later. Which is I think really I like just being in that like that phase of like there's so much that's been wiped out by the Empire and there's no Jedi left, and it's just like, oh, there's Jedi and Dark Jedi, and you know, I'm gonna train you this way, and it's like it was so unconventional, and it makes sense why in the EU, Luke's new Jedi Order was so vastly different from what the Jedi were before because of the way he had to just kind of like self-teach, which is interesting. But this is a fun little chapter. I love Han's plan here of like taking the lightsaber, and he obviously knows the intricacies of the YT-1300. So, you know, he cuts the line and sends the gas coming out of the top, and I was confused in that chapter initially of like, I was like, well, shouldn't the gas be coming out of the bottom? But I was like, well, I guess you could make that work. But go ahead, Seth.
I feel like now is the time to just say it. Han's my least favorite character so far in this book.
Really?
Yep. That I think that he just feels like they are just recycling bits from the OT when everybody else is kind of growing. He's kind of staying the same, like saying his whole, like, you know, well, no, but not everybody thanked me at once. Like, it's like, no, come up with new one-liners. Don't just say don't say the stuff. I don't know. Minor complaint. I just feel like that he has not grown, or he's not growing like how everybody else does.
He definitely
maybe that will get better
stagnant
in the second half. Yes, it does. And maybe that's part of who he is that he's not going to change. You know, he's flown from one side of this galaxy to the other. He's seen a lot of weird things.
It is interesting, though, because I think, at least in this state, I'm okay with it, because when we spoke to Zahn, he's very passionate about Han Solo, and he said, like, he really likes the idea of that character growing, and, you know, like, I think he in the book, they do say, and I have to find it somewhere, but I'm not going to do it. Like, he says that he resigned the title of being a general, that he didn't want to be a general anymore, but he's still They you know, all of these other smugglers come after him. I think Dravis is the guy, and he's like, "Oh, you've gone respectable," you know. And
that's chapter 2, I think.
It's in chapter 2, and you know, it's of course Han is still kind of invoking that feeling, but he is truly going. It is a more noble cause, right? So I'm interested to see. I don't think that I mean that is a very valid take. I'm curious to see. Now that when we get into the next couple chapters of where Han is going, what that's going to mean for his character. Obviously, you know more than I do, but
I'm just saying from this first half of the book, that's just a feeling I'm getting where I'm just like, why? Like, Han's my boy. Yeah. But like, I feel like that, you know, he grows a lot in 4, 5, and 6.
Oh yeah.
And then like, now it seems like everybody else is getting a chance to grow.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Anyway, continue.
Next couple, what do we got?
Yep, we got
chapter 11.
Chapter 11. Is that the little sound effect?
Was that the probe droid?
Yeah,
that was honestly a better sound of what it actually sounds like on the audio.
Oh yeah,
good job.
Thanks.
This, I'll be honest, this is my favorite chapter in the book, I think, thus far. This is when Luke and R2 show up on Dagobah.
Ooh, I got a fun story about this. Anyway, continue.
Okay, all right, I'd love to hear it.
Go on.
So he investigates Yoda's hut, which has basically been completely overtaken by vines and trees. And then he uses R2 to kind of pick up a signal from the cave, or to look for like signs of technology, whatever. And he finds a signal from the cave. Remember, what is this? Whatever.
Remember your failure at the cave. That's the line.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The same one that he has the vision in Empire Strikes Back.
Yep.
He walks through and a vision completely overtakes him. This time he is back on the skiff over the pit of Carcoon, where he sees, he tries to get the lightsaber. The lightsaber is pulled away by the Force to some mysterious woman who is like just laughing at him, and it dooms them all. And when he snaps out of the vision, he's like tweaking out, you know. And he finds this old little cylinder in the dirt with these like weird, strange symbols on it. They leave, and R2 informs Luke that Lando actually had one of these. He saw Lando have one in Empire Strikes Back, which I was like, okay. It was like interesting. But they change their course. Instead of going back to Coruscant, they go to head towards Lando's new mining front on, is it Naklon? Yeah, in the Athega system. So, yeah. Dope chapter.
I forgot this was in the first half. I lied. This is maybe my second favorite other than chapter 2.
It's
awesome.
It's really good. It's just, I love the idea of him going back to Dagobah, and it feels different. There's nobody there. The hut is overtaken, and he's speculating about the cave and what was the source of this dark side focal point. And I think I have some highlights. Yes, Seth, your story.
So I'm going to take you guys back. All right. I remember working at a pizza place, and this was this was shortly after Revenge of the Sith, and I'm talking to this other guy who he was much older than me, but huge Star Wars fan and everything. And him and I were talking, and he was saying that he was hoping that the kids would be born on Dagobah. Okay, all right, and that Naboo was Dagobah. Okay, and I'm like, why? And he goes, well, like this book. Okay, he was thinking the cave is where Darth Maul fell.
You've mentioned this. I've heard you mention this before.
Yeah, and so and I was like, that has always stayed with me. That I was like, that is the coolest thing ever. What does that make sense, Will?
No, I actually really like that.
Yeah, and that so the idea is that basically the Empire just forgets about Naboo after, because Padme and all that, and then it just becomes overgrown and it's just destroyed and everything. And so anyway, where Darth Maul fell is like where the cave resides, basically.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so
really cool.
Anyway, that's always stuck with me. I feel I try to I have to share it every time this that kind of idea comes up.
It feels like the inverse of in canon what they did with Mustafar, where Mustafar after the whole events in Vader Immortal starts to slowly heal itself. It feels like the inverse of that of Naboo slowly just
yeah.
That's an interesting. When was this?
When was what?
When your
conversation?
Mm-hmm.
I would say 03, 04, 05, right around that time. Yeah, that we were discussing it, because the whole thing is Luke's looking around, going something familiar about this place. Him saying that, where it's no, dude, you were born here. That that would have been cool.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Go back to what you're doing.
Well,
just back to regular scheduled programming. I just
I
really like that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that is really cool. Thank you for sharing that. The one thing I really like is the idea that Yoda was able to hide from the Empire because of the dark side presence. Basically, like it like negates out, like, oh, the dark side is so strong, but he's on the light side, so like it just kind of obscured like the Emperor and Vader's senses of being able to find him, which I think for the most part is kind of still which is really cool. I mean, I don't know how that really explains Obi-Wan per se, but like, I mean, it's still Yoda having such a strong presence in the Force might be kind of the exception to the rule, you know?
He's a bright candle, if you will.
Yes, yeah, and you got to have something to a really big shadow.
Yep.
Yeah, it's the dope chapter, and there's a little bit more teases that one last thing in my notes that I wanted to mention about this little thing in this cave. But Will, you got anything before I jump to 12?
Go for it.
Chapter 12, very, very snappy. The Falcon and crew, the Falcon crew and Luke, they both meet up together. So there is something that I need to talk about with this whole thing. Naklon is like basically they're on this city is this nomad city, and they're on the dark side of the planet, and there's a star, and basically like it rotates around that, so they have to stay in the dark side of the planet, and to get to the planet you have to use these giant shield ships, which is in by the way, Will, the West End Games source book. I believe the Dark Force Rising one. I found that out because I wanted to see what these things looked like, because they describe it as like an umbrella, like turned sideways, and the handle is like the kind of back part of it and stuff.
Seen the movie Sunshine?
I've heard of it. I've actually never seen it.
Gotcha. Check it out. There's something that, at least that's where my mind went.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it Chris Evans in that movie?
Yes. Imagine Armageddon, but it's good. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't seen Armageddon in a long time, dude. But yeah, they follow one of the shield ships to the planet. They approach the Nomad City. It's basically a giant Imperial dreadnought on a bunch of AT-ATs, which is really cool. Like that they took all the parts from these ships and put them on this roaming city. And as soon as they do, Star Destroyer shows up, pulls up in orbit. So any thoughts on this chapter? Before,
so we can jump into the next one if you want.
Perfect. That
was pretty straightforward.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. Again, similar. They go hand in hand. Chapter 13. As they prep to engage the fighters of the Star Destroyer, Luke is about to fight them. He is completely seized by a voice calling to him. Like he's he cannot control the ship. And after it stops, 30 minutes have passed. And the skirmish is almost completely over already. They get one of a couple fighters, and then the rest flee. And the Star Destroyer jumps to light speed. Pelion, Thrawn, and Jorah discuss their next steps, although there's tension, as it was not part of the plan for Sabaoth to reach out to Luke quite yet. They plan to place Sabaoth on a small planet called Jomark. But Thrawn and Pelion make a plan to get to Luke first, unbeknownst to Jorah. They want to get him, and then they find out during the raid on Naklon that they actually that 51 of these mole miner machines were actually taken unknown to them, which I'm kind of curious about, but then the Imperials, they put probes near the system to kind of track Luke's movements. This is a cool chapter. This little vision thing that Luke has where he's in the starfighter thing, really cool. I'm a big fan of this.
I think that as the book goes on, it's even more, it becomes more and more clear that this was meant to be an evil clone of Obi-Wan.
Oh yeah, definitely. This gives you those vibes. Yeah.
It's like the inverse of the trench run, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Use the Force.
It's kind of, it's just a shame that he wasn't able to. I get why, but I wish that Zahn was able to go through with his vision.
Would you want him to be a clone, though, of Obi-Wan?
In the current context of everything, no. But at the time, and just reading this in a vacuum of everything, Yeah, like if Ben has to leave him in the beginning of the story, and then now he has to reckon with this evil version of Ben Kenobi.
It just reminds me of like Spider-Man and Doctor Doom. It's like, oh, Mr. Stark.
Oh, that yeah, I guess.
That we all know is coming.
Just like, I hate you, 3000.
Yeah, exactly. I wish you were dead, 3000. Whap.
I think it's fun. I don't know. I think it's cool. I think that narratively, he acts as that dark mirror to Obi-Wan, which is neat.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I don't know. Maybe it doesn't need to be more literal than that, but
I mean, yeah. Now that you even say that, like, what's he want? Like, you know, the twins were the key to everything before. Now this evil Obi-Wan, the key. These new twins will be everyone's undoing for the galaxy. Yeah. He's seeking
it's kind of
them
fun,
as well.
Right?
Yes. I'm just giving you a hard time.
Yeah, it's just like an evil genius kind of, or mad scientist, you know.
Yes.
So the thing that I wanted to bring up during all this, I think this is all cool. I don't really have a whole lot of thoughts on this stuff. My confusion with this not getting to Naklon, it's leaving Naklon, that I don't understand how that works. And it's because the shield ships, the thing is on the front of the ship. So when you fly away, your back is exposed. And I'm like, is this a visualization thing? Am I visualizing this wrong? I don't understand. Because especially when you look at what the shield ships look like, if they're flying away, now if they can fly backwards, no problem. Right?
I thought the shield shifts around as they go.
Gosh. Get your imagination out of here.
What do you mean?
Just read the words on the page and accept them.
It just said, and they fly away. What?
They fly away. That's all you need to know.
Okay. I looked intensely into
he's a
the
ghost.
lore.
It's a Force ghost. He's alive in the Force, but he's a ghost. He's dead, but he's alive. He's a ghost.
They just fly away. That's it.
I looked so into the shield ships things, trying to figure out how they worked, and I was like, whatever. It's fine. It's fine.
Man, I honestly, when you ask, like, if you text me questions on the side, I'm like, I don't know either. Like, when you text me, I'm like,
watch Sunshine.
I have no idea. Absolutely. But there's probably so much other stuff that if I was to watch or read Star Wars through your eyes, I'd be like, hey, wait a minute. I never thought about it like that.
It's a thing of like, I think if I was watching it in a movie, I'd be like, oh, okay, that makes sense because I'm seeing it. But it's because I'm visualizing it. I'm like,
yeah,
why am I visualizing this wrong? You know, like that's the.
I'm trying to find it in the comic to help you out. Hold on.
It's not in the comic, bro. I looked it up. They just skip over it.
They weren't worried about it either.
See, I guess
send
not.
That to me in the Instagram chat. I can bring it up because that looks like a pizza. That looks like a pizza. I see a pizza.
You're a pizza.
Dang it! Yeah, dang, bro, got him.
I knew it.
Let's
chapter 14.
Chapter 14. Let's round out this rodeo here. A little bit of a lengthier description, but they discuss how and why the Empire raided Naklon for the miners. The mole miners. As they do. They discuss the piece of the tech that Luke finds in Dagobah, which Lando recognizes as a remote beacon transmitter for ships. I've got something to mention here, and it is my last note that I have. The group deliberates possible locations and safe slicers for Leia, but Lando doesn't really trust anybody that much. So Chewie suggests taking Leia to Kashyyyk, which Han is pretty hesitant about, but he does agree. Lando will go with Han and the Falcon, while Chewie takes Leia to Kashyyyk via the Lady Luck, his own personal ship, which was something that I was a big fan of when it popped up because it's in Jedi Outcast, and I was very happy to see it. Before they leave, they reprogram 3PO's voice to mimic Leia's as an additional decoy. Very cool. I like that. Luke and Leia speak about the transmitter and why he can't come with her, why it's not safe, why he has to go do all of this stuff. And he speaks truthfully about this communication that he receives in the Force, during that attack. Leia tells him of the rumor of Sabaoth on Jomark. I put Jomark, which Luke decides to follow. So everything kind of goes into place.
The party's splitting up.
Party splits up. Classic Star Wars. The thing that I wanted to bring up here is it's interesting that they talk about this little transmitter thing, and that Yoda left it. That it's how Yoda got trapped on Dagobah, was that he was fighting a dark Jedi. The dark Jedi died and created the cave, and then it got left in there, and that was how he got trapped on Dagobah, which is pretty interesting. They do mention this. I will pull it up. Everybody's looking at me like I'm crazy.
No, I feel like I forgot about something. What's the point of this transmitter thing? Like, why did Luke have to go to Dagobah to find it?
No, he didn't go there to find it. He just felt like
I know he went
to go
there and happened
then
to find it.
He went to the cave and he found that in the cave.
Yeah, I know he happened to find it, but I'm trying to remember what the point of it was. For some reason, I'm blanking on why.
That's what I thought, is that it was kind of a dead end where he just finds out that it was a ship transmitter and that it used to be Yoda's, and it got left there.
And then he goes to find Lando, right? Because he thinks that like Lando would recognize the markings or something.
Yeah,
like that.
right.
Yeah, and Lando's just like, it's old tech. It's just like a ship. It's like a beckon thing. Like it's.
But what ultimately is the point of this thing? What does it do? Like for the plot, I don't remember.
So far, I don't think it does anything because I think the point of the plot was that he went there to find the thing, but he ends up getting the vision of Mara Jade, or what we think is Mara Jade.
Okay.
That's what I think. Now I could be wrong.
Okay.
Let me pull up just to make sure there's
no, it's okay. It's okay. We can keep going. I don't want to derail us too hard. I just didn't know if anybody remembered off the top of their head.
Yeah, he said my personal ship was full rig, blah blah blah, found it on a swamp. He said, as in the place the Dark Jedi from Fosh fled to, that's the place. It could have just been easily lost some other time by someone else. Lando pointed out pre-Clone Wars calls could run for a century or more on standby. And he said it was the Dark Jedi's.
Right.
Or maybe it was Yoda's, or I don't remember. And he said, I found it in the cave. It tingles with the dark side. It must have been the place where he died. So I guess they're just setting up more Dark Jedi stuff. And it's just kind of like okay, here's a little thing, but it says, yeah.
Again, we can move on. I was just, yeah. Okay.
No, I it's a good question because I was also like, Chapter 15, the protagonists, they split up. Luke goes to Jomark, while Leia and Chewie transfer onto the Lady Luck for Kashyyyk, and the rest on the Falcon. Which includes 3PO. Lando makes a plan to send out some fake Leia transmissions, and then make contact with Talon Card as a backup plan in case Leia is spotted on Kashyyyk. And plus to learn more about this Imperial head commander, which they've of course been catching wind of vicariously. And also for Lando to figure out what happened to his mole miners. We switch to Pelion, and the Imperials. He updates Thrawn about the deployed probes. Thrawn, through a lot of measures, which is very cool, he's able to deduce that the strategy based on the time it took between the transmission and when they were, like, how much time they were actually docked, the ships were docked, that they basically who was with who and what would make sense and things like that. Like, Han and Leia wouldn't switch over to the Lady Luck because they would be less defended, so it has to be this combination. Really cool stuff. On the other end, they make a plan to fake intercept Luke before he reaches Jomark. Any thoughts?
Real quick, I looked that up because it was bothering me. Evidently, that beckon call thing is a plot line that is not picked up until the Thrawn duology.
Is that the Vision of the Future, Spectre of the Past?
It's they don't say the name of it. They just say Thrawn duology. But evidently, do you care? Do you want me to tell you? I won't have to say. It involves Card. It involves Talon Card. And So it's a plot thread that doesn't get picked up till then. I guess narratively, it's just
Is that where he
it's just a
dresses up like
vehicle.
Boba Fett?
No,
I just
are you talking about
Thrawn
yeah.
dresses up as Jodo Cast for a hot second, and I'm like, I don't understand. I've never
but that's in the Galactic Civil War. That's not even in this time. Yeah. But I looked that up as well. That's yeah. We jump to our final chapter, chapter 16. Not of the book, but of our recap thus far. Luke, as he's heading towards Jomark, he's yanked out of hyperspace. And he sees a freighter that is under siege by a Star Destroyer, which is the Chimera. And off in the distance, there is an interdictor cruiser assisting. Rebels fans, interdictor cruisers, very cool. This is the first time they appeared. Luke does some very fancy flying, does some diving, does some twisting to get out of the mass shadow of the interdictor, all of this stuff. Really cool, fancy flying, son of Anakin Skywalker right there, and he's able to get out of the tractor beam using some proton torpedoes and jump to hyperspace. We switch over to the Imperials. Very cool moment here. Thrawn corrects the error that was made, where he goes up to the officer that was, or the whatever this little guy is, this Imperial controlling the tractor beam, and he swiftly deals with the error. There's a very good quote about the difference between an error and mistake that I'll pull up here in a second. But Rook eliminates the officer that made the mistake. He's able to gauge with Luke's flying that his ship won't have made it actually very far, because the maneuver that he did will only let him go like they say a specific distance, like a parsec or something like that, before it'll fail. So they track the vector that he jumped to hyperspace in, and instead of handling it themselves, he puts out a bounty for anybody in the nearby area to specific organizations for him.
Yes, very cool.
Very cool stuff.
I like it. I like what happens. I don't want to spoil it because I've read further in, but the next few chapters are some of my favorites, and it's for the goofiest reasons. But
really,
yeah, we'll get into it next time. But yeah, I like this. I think it's fun that it's almost like coincidentally that he runs into the Chimera, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's coincidental. They wanted it to look coincidental, but it was definitely intentional. Like,
so they knew it was Luke, right?
Mm-hmm. They were trying to stop Luke, so that's why they tried to plan a fake interception where it was supposed to be like, oh, I just stumbled upon these Imperials, but it was very much intentional on Thrawn's part, which is cool. Yeah, Seth.
I guess this is the one time, kind of like that moment with you. I was a little confused with Luke going around, being caught in the tractor beam, and then like I was kind of like having a little bit of trouble visualizing all of that.
I did as well, and I reread the chapter, and then I was like, okay, that made sense, because it's like he dives down, then pulls back up, and then he like gets yanked by the tractor beam and is like going around the ship.
Yeah, he's like he's wrapping around it and staying like going with it and stuff. And I was like, okay, but feels more complex than it needs to be.
He basically like reverses the thruster polarity or something, and like jumps back, gets it off the thing, shoots the proton torpedoes, bam. Like there's also this really cool moment where he's using the force to like dodge the laser beat, like the shots and stuff, and then he's still kind of getting hit before he's like, we're free of the mass shadow, punch it, you know?
Yep.
Which is really cool. But there's a really cool line from Thrawn. Just a banger Thrawn bar. He says, do you know the difference between an error and a mistake, Ensign? Is it ensign? Ensign? I believe ensign.
Ensign?
Ensign?
I don't know. I don't
know.
Okay.
Maybe. I don't know. And the officer replies, no, sir. Thrawn says, anyone can make an error, Ensign, but that error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. And he says he raised a finger and almost lazily pointed. Pelion never even saw Rook move. Peterson certainly never even had time to scream. From further down the crew pit came the sound of someone trying valiantly not to be sick. I love how it doesn't even tell you what happens. It's just it's like, you can think about what happened right here. Good stuff, dude. Really good stuff. Yeah.
And to make Thrawn mad enough to do that, it's like,
well, it shows that like, even even Thrawn's not above Vader tactics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's for a reason, right? It's not that he did it out of anger. It's like, you messed up. We can't have this point of weakness anymore. And Pelion even asked him after he was just,
Captain.
yeah, it's like Vader was temperamental, but Thrawn is very much like, I can't have this weakness. And Pelion asks, but you knew where Luke was going anyway. And he was like, we can't afford to if we want to win, we can't afford mistakes like this, you know? So it's cool stuff.
Yeah.
But that's the end of what we have read for this installment of Heir to the Empire. Sorry once again that it's long-winded. These obviously that's how books are, to go through everything. But yeah, y'all have any final thoughts before we close out the stream?
This is awesome. I'm glad we're finally covering these.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's nice that we got one that is a little bit more fun. The last one was a little bit of a schlock to get through.
Well, Dark Disciple and Living Force took a toll on Seth over here.
Did. They took a little piece of me. So yeah.
Yeah, it's just good stuff. I'm glad that y'all are enjoying it, even rereading it or experiencing it. But
it's been so long that like it's yeah.
So I'm pumped. I hope everybody in the audience is enjoying it. We will be back hopefully early December to finish out Heir to the Empire before we then transfer into Dark Force Rising.
Very excited.
Yeah. Any last things we need to say before we close out? Any comments we need to bring up? Anything like that?
Go check out Mortis FM. He's great.
Yeah.
Hey, go check out Beyond the Dune Sea. Buy their merch.
Well, you need to check out Will of the Force. Puts us all to shame.
Yeah.
Well, I could say Beyond the Dune Sea, but only watch the right side of the screen because that's the side that Seth's on. Unless you are too balanced on the Connor side, then watch the Connor side, right? Isn't right? Right? I don't know.
Like
watch
that.
both of them. Watch everybody. Have some fun, people.
It's all love around here.
And do some physics. Why don't
More
you?
importantly, read some books. That's the whole point of these things. This has been so much fun. Go out, buy a book, buy an audiobook, support the creators of these things. Go get them signed if you have an opportunity to do so. But man, I think it's something that's a little lost today. I know not everybody reads as much as we probably should, but this is a great opportunity and a great excuse. Pick up a book, get to reading. It's good for you. And you get to discover some awesome stories that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise. Like, man, how did I go my whole life without reading these? They're so awesome. So
I agree.
Fill up those bookshelves, people. And as I was telling Grayson the other day, when you have a full bookshelf of books you haven't read, it's not a chore list. It's a wine cellar. It's there for you.
Yeah.
It's there for you for the right occasion where you can just pull them out and enjoy yourself a nice story.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go.
Well said. Connor's the wizard here. Well,
Seth's done. He gets enough of my nonsense most of the time. He's like, I'm out. See ya.
We will be back in soon time. I don't know. I'm saying soon time.
Soonish.
Is that Death Troopers?
It is Death Troopers. I was like, I think I have a Star Wars book nearby.
I'm looking for that copy right there. Yeah, I need to get that. Yeah. May the Force be with you all. And remember, if it's not in our archives, doesn't exist?
It doesn't exist. Were you setting me up? Did you want me to say it?
I don't know. I thought I set it up. Did I not set it up, Will?